You're listening to Power Athlete Radio, a podcast dedicated to empowering your performance every damn day. Join former NFL pro and Power Athlete founder John Welborn as he dissects the greatest minds in strength, conditioning, and more. So whether your goal is to be the hammer, destroy mediocrity, or simply move the dirt, you've come to the right place. Now with the warm-up done, let the gains begin.
Hey, Power Athlete Nation. Time to belt up. We have a hard-hitting podcast today with Mr. Rafael Lovato. Lovato started his journey in martial arts at an early age. After cutting his teeth in Jeet Kune Do, he made a move to Jiu-Jitsu, where the story begins. Presently, he's a 5th degree Jiu-Jitsu black belt under Salo and Sanjay Ribeiro of Six Blades. He holds the distinction of being part of the first American father-son duo to earn black belts in Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. Competition has always been important, so 20 plus years ago, he started traveling to Brazil to compete. Let me tell you, it's uncommon for Americans to travel to Brazil to compete and win today. Imagine what it was 20 years ago. But Lovato understood to be the best, you have to train and compete with the best. Today, he's one of the few in the world who can claim the title of world champion in gi and no-gi jiu-jitsu and MMA. His growth as a mentor and businessman has expanded into his own brand of Lovato Jiu-Jitsu schools with over 30 locations. He's active on social. He shares his knowledge from his home base academy in Oklahoma City and online at timelessjujitsu.com. Prepare yourself for Mr. Rafael Lovato.
I have some big plans. I'm going to be releasing a book early next year, just finishing it up right now, and then going to start the back and forth edits and all that, which will probably take me basically the rest of the year. And then we get that out, and I'm kind of hoping that leads to a podcast of the same title. Afterwards, I would love to.
What's the title? Are you okay to drop it? Well, you can say working title.
Yeah. Well, it's finalized, but
okay.
But if you follow me, you could probably figure it out.
Okay.
But I want to save it before I
okay.
When I say it, I want already to have everything lined up where people can go and start following it. And, it's a whole new venture, a brand, and just something that I want to do to kind of obviously share my story through martial arts, but give people the lessons and the motivation, inspiration, and everything that helped me that I believe that you can apply into any walk of life and help you reach your goals. And so I'm hoping that, obviously I'll have a lot of people that follow me through martial arts that will check it out, but then I really wanted to expand into something very big that connects me, with everybody in the world and allow me the opportunity to give them some positive energy, make a positive impact on their life, and just see where that leads, and just connect to more people outside martial arts that are high level achievers and give me the opportunity to learn from them, speak with them, and just share the energy, just like what we're doing today. I like being a part of podcasts. Mm-hmm. And so I just thought down the line, like as I kind of slowed down the competition and, look for new opportunities and new ways to do what I'm interested in, other things that I love to do that I don't get to put first and foremost, kind of transition into that lane and explore those a little more.
Gotcha. So I'm really into origin stories. I'm fascinated by where people come from, how they got into this, and how you've kind of ascended to who you are. And I know we talked a little bit about it because we met at IBJJF Worlds in Long Beach. Mm-hmm. Was that 2 months ago?
Yeah.
Feels like 2 months ago. But the idea that, growing up in Oklahoma, your dad owned a martial arts studio and you grew up in mm-hmm. that environment.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. It's pretty crazy because it was all very much like this timeline of, nowadays martial arts, specifically mixed martial arts, jiu-jitsu, they've become very popular. Basically everyone knows what MMA is. They might think of it as UFC, you do UFC or something like that. But that sport has grown to an immense level. And then inside of that, anyone that watches UFC or any sort of MMA, now they're very aware of what jiu-jitsu is. Oh, that's the stuff they're doing when they're on the ground, especially with Joe Rogan being a commentator and being as intelligent, as he is with his martial arts background. And he is a jiu-jitsu practitioner, a jiu-jitsu black belt. He's put in a lot of great, he's given us a lot of exposure. So now everyone knows, but I came up in a much different era where nobody knew. And I was really kind of a part of the transition from sort of traditional martial arts as it evolved into mixed martial arts, but that was all through Jeet Kune Do. Mm-hmm. So my father, he's a Jeet Kune Do instructor. I was born in Ohio, in Cincinnati, and we lived there until I was 8. And there was a Jeet Kune Do school that he was a part of in Cincinnati, Ohio. And he was an assistant instructor. He was influenced by Bruce Lee, as basically everyone was back in those days. And he was a boxer when he was younger. Then he got into traditional martial arts, and then he discovered Bruce Lee. And then he sought out Jeet Kune Do. Mm-hmm. He wanted to do what Bruce Lee did. And we had a Jeet Kune Do school there. He was also a professional organist. So my dad is like just a one-of-a-kind guy. Like, I mean, who do you know can like fight and play the organ? You know what I mean? And so he was a professional organist. He would practice. He led the choir. He did all that in the day. And then at night, we'd go to the academy and I would watch him train. And I'd be the kid over on the side playing with my toys or whatever and just watching, seeing what was going on. And then when I got to be about 4, I started my first official classes at that school. Actually, it was Kempo that I did first. That was like kind of their kids program, was a Kempo program. But keep in mind, my father had already been training me and teaching me at home since I could move, basically. And I'm an only child. So I had all of his focus and energy on me at all times. But that's what we were doing. And then when I was 8, we moved to Oklahoma. My mom is from Oklahoma, and we actually thought we might move to Texas, but it didn't work out. And then we ended up in Oklahoma, and my parents both got jobs relatively quickly. My father was a physical therapist at a hospital, and obviously he, loves martial arts, and he was looking for an opportunity to start teaching, and the hospital gave him that opportunity. So he started teaching a martial arts class inside the hospital, which quickly grew. And it became like 20, 30 people. And then he kind of had like a little garage dojo going on, and to give his students more opportunities to train with him. Mm-hmm. And then it was like, all right, let's go all in and open up a school. And so he had opened up a martial arts school there. It was called Martial Arts International. Everyone called it MAI for short. And that was our first school. And that was 30 years ago, over 30 years ago now. It was like April of 93. And he was a Jeet Kune Do representative. It was a Jeet Kune Do school. We had a lot of like Richard Bastillo and several of the instructors inside the JKD world that would come and teach seminars. And it was right around that time that my dad was going to California to do the Jeet Kune Do instructor conferences that they held every year. And he got introduced to the Gracies, so like the Jeet Kune Do mindset was very much, learn everything and put it together and create your own system. They knew that there was different ranges of combat. And they did everything from weapons, into different kicking arts like Savate, of course, Muay Thai. And then they had a lot of boxing influence into like the trapping range that led to clinching and basically some grappling. It was very like rough back in the days, like catch wrestling, catch as catch can, and even like shoot fighting style grappling. It was nowhere near any like real technical level as jiu-jitsu, but it existed, and we knew that fighting on the ground was it was important to have some understanding of that. My dad, as a smaller guy, he was only like 145 pounds back in those days when he was in his 30s, and and he really gravitated towards jiu-jitsu once he got exposed to it. And the Gracies and everything. That really had a big impact on him. And he began going back and forth to California to learn from the Gracies. It was it kind of led him to Hickson. He spent some time at Hickson School, and then the following years, as he went back, he met the Machados. So the Jeet Kune Do instructor conference, they used the Machados in one of the following years as their grappling instructors. And he really loved the Machado brothers. I remember how excited he was to tell me about his experience with them when he came back. Excuse me. And that was a game changer, because then, this is now a couple years later, rolling into like 96, Carlos Machado, who's the oldest of the Machado brothers, he calls my dad and says, hey, Chuck Norris, he was one of their students in LA. He was a student of the Machados in LA. He got signed on to do the Walker, Texas Ranger show, which is an awesome show. And they had the Machado brothers in that show. He got signed to do that show, and he wanted to keep learning jiu-jitsu. And so he said, hey, Carlos, will you come with me to Dallas, Texas, and keep teaching me in Texas? And so he was the reason that Carlos moved to Dallas, and that was just a game changer for us. And Carlos calls us up and says, hey, I'm gonna move to Dallas, and he's kind of like, that's pretty close to you, right? And we're like, yeah, it's only 3.5 hours away. And so now my dad doesn't have to go all the way to California anymore. And I had actually already done a trip to California before that. I think it was like a spring break or something. We drove all the way there. I drove with my dad. Anyways, Carlos moves to Dallas, and now we only have to go, 3.5 hours to get access to a jiu-jitsu black belt. And Carlos is an amazing teacher. And my dad just started going down there every week. He would go on Thursdays. He would do a lesson in the morning, do the morning class that Carlos taught, and then drive back home and then teach classes at night at our school. And he did that every Thursday for about like 3 years.
Wow.
And then now I'm starting to become a teenager, like 15, 16 years old. And basically kind of transitioned to where he was so busy with the school, and now I'm a little older, and my dad doesn't really fly. He's a driver. He doesn't like to fly. He basically started sending me everywhere. And, it used to be him going and coming back and showing me what he learned, and we would drill and work on stuff. Like I said, my dad was a smaller guy. I was a big kid. So we kind of were the same size. And then I started getting bigger than him pretty quickly. But I was naturally his number one training partner. And then it kind of transitioned to me traveling around, and then I would study and, learn and compete, train, do the whole thing, and then come home and show my dad what I learned, tell him about my experience. And then we would work on the stuff that I brought home. And that was it. That was our process. And that led to us not only being the first black belts in the state of Oklahoma, but being the first to offer jiu-jitsu there, the first to bring this level of martial arts to our area of the country. But we also became the first American father and son jiu-jitsu black belts.
Oh, wow. Damn.
Yeah.
That's, dude, the Jeet Kune Do stuff is super fascinating. I mean, I lived in Oakland, and not far from where Bruce Lee lived. So that was always big. And then my training partner in college was a guy named Drake Parker. His uncle was Ed Parker.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. So his dad's David Parker, who's obviously Ed Parker's brother. They've since passed away. But it was neat when I got to go to Hawaii and hang out with him. He would always tell stories about Elvis and his brother and all that. So it was neat. And then, so that's how I knew about American Kempo, was through Ed Parker.
Did you happen to know the name Richard Bustillo?
No.
He was actually a Hawaiian guy.
Oh, was he?
He was one of Bruce's top students, along with Danny Inosanto.
So I went to a martial arts event that had Danny Inosanto that was doing a bunch of like Bruce Lee stuff, like the 1-inch punch and the push-ups and all that. So we got to meet him. It was pretty neat. Somewhere there's an autograph of it.
Yeah.
Because I started in Shotokan when I was 6.
Okay.
And then when I was 10, I thought kicking was stupid. And that's when I got into boxing.
Awesome. Yeah. I have pictures with Danny when I was like 6 years old. My father was going to a lot of his seminars, but he really had a close bond with Richard. I think a lot of that had to do with Richard was also a former boxer as well. And my dad had the boxing background. He was born in Chicago and he grew up boxing in Chicago. And so I spent a lot of time with Richard. Richard came to our house. He came to Oklahoma, and he was right along the same lines of Danny. Is just like this incredible wealth of knowledge and martial artist, always learning and practicing well into his later years. I mean, you see Danny today, he's got to be in his 80s. Yeah. He still moves. He's still training, still teaching. And they were both one of the first ones to go all in on jiu-jitsu and study jiu-jitsu, get their black belts and everything from those core JKD guys. That was just an incredible experience to be so close to Bruce, basically. Yeah. These were his...
It's the source.
Yeah, exactly. And then Chuck Norris is the reason that jiu-jitsu came to our not back door. I mean, it was another state, but that was a huge deal for us, not having to go all the way to California, New York, or Florida. Those were basically the options of jiu-jitsu back in those days.
Yeah. Well, I run into this constantly with people where, like, if the best dude in the world is like across town, like, get in your car and drive.
Yeah.
It's like when I met Shanji and he's like, oh, it's kind of a bit of a drive. And I kind of shrugged my shoulders and I'm like, I've been saying this for years. If like somebody's good in your town, go learn from them. I mean, your dad drove 3 hours each way to go learn from somebody. Yeah. Now you get people like, God, it's 3 streets away. I don't know if I can go. Yeah. It's a weird deal where knowledge was so, there were so many few people doing it that you almost had to go search it out.
Right.
And there was, and it's good as an instructor. If somebody puts that effort forth, you feel like you have to at least meet them halfway.
Totally. And I talk about that too. I attribute a lot of my success to that, even though it was harder. I didn't have daily access. I appreciated it more when I was there, so I wasn't going through the motions. I was 100% engaged. I had my notebook. I had questions lined up that I knew I was going to ask, because it's like, okay, I only have a day or a week, whatever, that I'm going to be around this person that can actually answer my questions. I want to make sure I ask everything. I would take notes on all the answers, and I would just study. I would always be watching. If I wasn't training, I'd be watching. If I was training, I was like really trying to register everything that people were trying to do to me and were doing to me. And then if I didn't know or understand why they were doing that, I would ask them. I would just keep asking questions, just trying to absorb as much knowledge as I could. And then I would take it all home. And then me and my dad would practice the same stuff for an extended amount of time, because we weren't learning something new every day. So we would give everything the time it deserved to really explore, practice, drill, give the repetitions, and then come up with our new set of questions. And then we would start showing it to our students, which also helped us drill and review and just, keep jamming it into our heads.
Was it difficult to have a school there with so little understanding of what you guys were teaching?
It was. Once again, it's a different time. And so here we are kind of way ahead of the game. And, my father, he's a pioneer of martial arts in our area of the country. And just as an American in general, there weren't a lot of black belts back in those days, American black belts. And the whole package that he had to offer was just really one of a kind back then. And so, we have this cutting edge martial arts school in the middle of nowhere. But then when people think of martial arts, they just thought of Taekwondo, karate, the traditional martial arts.
Sure.
And so it was hard to really express the value in where we were, like what we were doing. It's hard for people to understand that. And not to mention, my dad, he's old school. He's pretty hardcore. And so he was much more in a training, building, like, I don't want to say just tough guys. I mean, he was creating incredible martial artists, but it was pretty hardcore, Like
it was not kind and gentle.
No.
No.
We were doing grappling on carpet, on concrete carpeted floor. We didn't have AC, we didn't have a lot back in those days. And my dad was the type that, okay, we're going to start this class by going out and running 2 or 3 miles, come back. Then we're going to do, this much mitt work and cardio. And then after all that, we're going to start sparring, and then we're going to spar, and then we're going to grapple on the floor, and, it was rough. And on one hand, like I can look back on that and just be so grateful, that I came up in that process. It definitely made me tough. And we were going full on like MMA style. I was just a kid. I was 15, 16 years old fighting grown men. And, we were in a kind of a rough area of town, and like someone came in kind of talking, oh, what is this stuff? You can't beat me up, whatever. I want to challenge your best guy. And that happened all the time.
Really?
All the time. And my dad would be like, all right, come on in, sign this waiver. I got some gloves for you. Let's go. And by the time I was 15, 16, we would get wrestlers, kickboxers, karate guys, whatever, come in, say some things. And my dad would be like, all right, go with my son. And I was the one to
take out the trash
and give him a little bit of extra humiliation because, I had pimples on my face and I'm just a teenager in high school,
How old were you when you got your black belt?
I had just turned 21.
Wow.
It was like a month after I turned 21. But I started going to Brazil. The first time I went to Brazil, I was 16. And so I was getting exposed to just this new world of jiu-jitsu, and I was watching Vale Tudo fights, bare knuckle MMA fights. It was a different time, but it was amazing. And the very first Worlds was in 96. And the first Worlds that I went to was 99.
Wow.
And so I've nearly been to and seen and competed at every world championship. Almost, I took a break when I was doing MMA, but from 99 to 2014, I was basically at every single one of them competing.
We interrupt this episode with a shameless self-promotion. Are you pushing through performance roadblocks caused by pain or janky movement mechanics? Knock the rust off with our movement health courses, used by thousands of athletes worldwide, from average Joes to MVPs. Our courses give you the tools to assess and fix yourself so you can get back to break-in necks and cash in checks. Not convinced? Get a taste of how our courses can help you by enrolling in a free sample today. Head to powerathletehq.com and search courses from the menu. Now back to the show. So what is it about jiu-jitsu? I mean, you've been exposed to Jeet Kune Do, Kempo, MMA, mixed martial arts. What is it about jiu-jitsu that you went in that direction? I mean, because you ended up getting back into MMA, but like, what is it about like the allure of jiu-jitsu?
Well, I mean, to talk about how amazing jiu-jitsu is, we could go on and on and on for that, about that for hours. At that time specifically, almost kind of similar to why my dad loved it so much too. I was still a kid. I was smaller, and I was boxing a lot at that time. I was doing Golden Gloves, like amateur boxing as a kid from about 9 to 12 years old. And it's not like we had a team of kids for me to box with. So my normal day-to-day boxing training that I was doing was with adults. I was a big kid too. So I sparred a lot with adults, and I'm getting hit in the head. I wasn't near as strong as I'm a little kid. I'm 10, 11
Sure.
years old, so it is what it is. But once we started learning the more technical jiu-jitsu, and I already did enjoy the grappling that we were doing in JKD, and the fact that I was long and flexible and stuff like that, I could do a couple things on the ground with adults back then, and I could feel myself give them a little bit of a hard time. But then once we started doing the more technical jiu-jitsu, and our eyes were really getting open to how deep that world was, and I'm starting to learn. And of course, I'm learning more than what everyone else is doing because of all the extra time I was spending with my dad. And I started traveling at a young age. You know, I was getting all this exposure. By the time I was 14, I could give every adult around me a real problem. I was a problem for them. They couldn't just hit me, you know, they couldn't beat me up the same way they could if we were boxing. And I mean, I think I submitted my first adult blue belt when I was 14. And I had these long legs, flexible, very hard for people to pass my guard, and I could triangle them. And I was just triangling all the, you know, the grown-ups around.
That's where Philippe gets it, huh?
Well, that's the beauty of starting when you're young.
Yeah.
You learn how to survive, you get a good guard, and then when you grow up and you get bigger, then you can learn how to be on top and be heavy and be strong and all that. Yeah. And so then you have this complete style.
Yeah.
And
no, I've always said like learning like how to Olympic weightlift and jiu-jitsu and all this after you're already strong puts you at a disadvantage.
100%.
Because you can rely upon, I mean, Shanji talks about all the time. He's like the energy button on the game. Like, don't hit the energy button.
Yeah.
Like pretend you're weak. Just learn to use the techniques.
Yeah.
Makes sense.
Yeah. There's definitely a downside to being a really great athlete and learning martial arts, specifically jiu-jitsu, where technique is so deep and so important. If you can just athlete out of stuff and, you know, just kind of power explode or whatever, turn it up in a way that other people can't keep up with, your technique is going to suffer because of that. But for me personally, as soon as I started submitting regularly, all the adults around, I just like, man, this is it. I love this stuff. And then when I got exposed to the sport, because keep in mind, when we first started learning jiu-jitsu, we didn't know there was a sport of jiu-jitsu. Nowadays, it almost kind of rubs me the wrong way a little bit when like people say, oh, I'm looking for a sport to practice, you know, or I'm looking for specifically with like kids, like parents come in, I'm looking for a sport for my kid so he can compete and things like that. Yes, there is a sport, but it's a martial art. You know, it's a lifestyle, it's a way of life, and it's self-defense. It's so much deeper than a sport. Obviously, there's a lot of great character building things that we can get from sports, but for me, martial arts, I mean, it's for the long haul. Once we become a martial artist, we're going to be a martial artist for the rest of our life. And so I really try to practice and preach to my students the martial arts lifestyle. And for me, that's what I grew up in with my father. It's martial arts. And we act a certain way, and we are doing this for self-defense. There was always a real life combat theme for why we were learning all these things. And so when I first started learning jiu-jitsu, it was because, hey, you need to know how to fight on the ground. You need to know how to defend yourself. And this is the best thing for you to do in a scenario where someone's bigger, stronger, you know, close the distance, clinch up, put them down, control them, choke them, whatever, you know, and take as little damage as possible. And so it was a few, I can't say the exact time, but it was a couple years in before we actually saw a sport jiu-jitsu match. What we saw of jiu-jitsu was like the Gracie in action tapes and Vale Tudo fights and things like that. It's like, that was the combat of jiu-jitsu that we saw. And then it was like, hey, wait a minute, there's actually tournaments and competitions for jiu-jitsu. And then, of course, that led to me going to Brazil and competing in the world championships. Is
there a difference between like a combative self-defense style jiu-jitsu and what we see within the sport of jiu-jitsu?
Definitely. There is a, like, it goes way deeper when we're talking about sport, the amount of techniques and games and vast arrays of mini games that we can do become not necessary when we're talking about real combat. We're going to focus on basically the fundamentals, the simple things that are straightforward, straight to the point, that's really all you need. But at the same time, you need to become a master of those, and not get lost in the sport world. Like the first jiu-jitsu that I practiced, there were a lot of takedowns. We did a lot of takedowns. It wasn't, we weren't quick to just pull guard, and we weren't very good at the takedowns, but there were takedowns. Just as the sport has evolved, it's beautiful, but it's definitely changed the landscape 100%. It's amazing to see the professional opportunities and just the ability to live as a jiu-jitsu practitioner, a competitor, and how many people are doing jiu-jitsu these days. But once again, back in that time, it was hard to have a school. It was hard to have a school the way my dad ran the school. And there were a lot of tough times coming up, business-wise, and then just all the sacrifice and hardships to learn and being forced to travel. And I mean, in my days, you had to go to Brazil. You weren't going to see the best guys any other way. There was no YouTube. I mean, you could maybe get your hands on some VHS tapes, but there was no other way to really see the highest levels of jiu-jitsu without going to Brazil. And you kind of needed to do that to really level up and work your way to a world level stage, or just ability, level of ability. If we only stayed in Oklahoma,
you'd have been big fish in a little pond.
Yeah. I mean, you wouldn't know who I am, I wouldn't be where I am today, but like I said, that's such a beautiful part of my journey. And when I started going to Brazil in the beginning of those years as a kid, that completely changed me. I just said, I saw the passion. I saw the sport being done. The champions and the greats of that time, just, with no media, no money, nothing. And I saw them fighting with so much passion and love and pride. And I saw that and I said, man, I want to be one of these guys that everyone is standing and cheering for. I want to be that guy, and I really wanted to do it in Brazil. I wanted to be a gringo winning in Brazil. Mm-hmm. And that just changed my life.
Power Athlete Nation, this episode is brought to you by 8 Sleep. Summer's in full effect and it is hot here in Texas. And when I say hot, I mean hot. And the best way to sleep is at 55 degrees with the 8 Sleep pod cover. This thing allows the bed to get icy, and there's nothing better on a hot night than slipping into an icy cold bed. Now, there's a few features of this thing that are absolute game changers. One, it's a pod cover, so it fits on top of your present mattress. Anybody that's been in the market and had to go out and shop for a new mattress, complete pain in the ass, because you usually have a significant other or a friend or whoever sleeps with you that decides, hey, this is the temperature I like firmer, I like softer, so you can keep your mattress. It's a pod cover that fits on top. Also, it's split zone. So let's say I like to sleep at 55 degrees and my wife likes to sleep at 65. We can have separate temperatures, which just makes everybody happy. And then also for the performance crowd, which I'm kind of a geek, I like to know all of the different sleep metrics out there. It gives me how long I slept, how restful, how many breaths, and most importantly, my HRV, which I can track. So it allows me to know how restful and how well I sleep. It also has some custom tuning with different temperatures that gets really deep in the weeds with this thing. It's as good a system as I've ever seen. So if you're interested in checking out the 8 Sleep pod cover, you can use the code 8sleep.com/powerathlete for $150 off. I recommend you check it out. I'm not only telling you about it, I'm also a user every single night, and I'm sold on 8 Sleep. Check it out. Is there a difference between like what the Machados teach and let's say like the Gracie lineage, even though I know they're both related, they're like cousins. But I know I met Jean-Jacques Machado. He has no fingers on his hands. And I know Todd White, who's my neighbor up the road. He's one of his original black belts. And he talked about like his style was different because he did not have the ability to have grips.
Yeah. Well, with the Machados, you had a really amazing combination between all of them. A couple of them were a little more on the competitive side. Jean-Jacques, he had the disability that really, and he was a competitor. And so his technical approach and the way he developed his style with his hand just had a major inspiration on how good he got because of that thing disabling him.
Yeah.
And he was a competitor. And so he's, really challenging and testing himself at the highest levels. And then Hegan also liked to compete. Carlos, the oldest, was more of the intellectual. He's very well read. I would stay with him. When I was younger, he would let me stay at his apartment in Dallas as he was getting settled in there. And I would just kind of follow him around to gym. I would be his partner for all of his private lessons, do every single class that he taught, and just kind of be that kid just following the adult. He's kind of babysitting me, and but I would just work and train all day. But Carlos was always reading, and he was just a very introspective as well. He loved philosophy, and just he could talk and talk and talk with people, just loved learning and gaining knowledge. And he took that approach to his teaching style. He's just very detail oriented. He would write notes as he taught. He'd just get ideas. Oh, we can do this, we can do that. He really loved diving deeper through all the layers of technique and finding the most efficient way to perform a move. And he was an amazing teacher, and I got to spend a lot of time with him. And then there's a couple other brothers that competed and taught, and they're kind of a blend of, from one side to the other of teaching, competing. And so you got a nice mix of minds, bodies, and styles all within one family. And they were very close, very tight knit. They were all together in LA initially. And then Carlos was the first to move. And then, of course, over the years, everyone kind of had different things going on.
When they came out, they were actually teaching at the Gold's Gym in Redondo Beach down the because we used to train there in high school. And I used to see the Machado signs, and they were actually teaching classes in the aerobics room.
That's amazing.
Yeah. And
the academy that they opened after that, if you ever were around that area, it was also...
Yeah, I grew up in Torrance.
Yeah.
My dad's office was one street over on Torrance Boulevard. Carson Street was where was where the original Gracie Academy was. And there was an all-you-can-eat Japanese restaurant called Todai we used to go to right behind it.
There was probably a day where you were driving by, you saw the Machado School, and me and my dad were inside there.
Yeah.
But yeah, the Gracie brothers, they were a little more split, Hickson had his thing going on, and they weren't they weren't very active in jiu-jitsu competition. Hickson was fighting in Japan. He was actually fighting. Hoist was fighting. Henzo was doing ADCC and stuff like that, but he was in New York. And he's not, he's a cousin, right? So different side of the Gracie family. So I think the Machados were a little more on the jiu-jitsu competition scene. They were doing worlds, they were doing ADCC, they were building a competition team of their own. A lot of the OG Machado American students were going to Brazil along with me. I was part of that group from Texas and also California, even Hawaii. The Inoue brothers were under the Machados. They were medaling at the World Championships at the blue, purple, and brown belt ranks, way back in the days when it was really difficult for a non-Brazilian to win a world medal. When I first started going to Brazil to compete at the World Championships,
how old were you?
I had just turned 16.
Oh, wow.
It was 99. The Worlds were in July, and my birthday is June 25th. So I just turned 16. It was the summer between my sophomore and junior year of high school. I'm a kid from Oklahoma, and I go to Brazil, third world country, to compete in the World Championships. So I immediately had my eyes open, and I was very overwhelmed and uncomfortable and kind of in awe, but also a little scared. Like, this is kind of a dangerous place, and all these guys look really scary.
Where'd you go, Rio?
Yeah,
Rio. I've been to Rio. I know exactly what you're talking about.
Yeah. You see real poverty, real...
Yeah, see the favelas and all that. It's like next level.
Real danger, for sure. And I would just turn 16, kid from Oklahoma. without my parents.
Yeah, solo.
No one's really taking care of me. I mean, they're supposed to, but they're also doing their own thing.
Sure.
You know? So yeah, I grew up pretty quick, but oh gosh, why did we start? Where did we go with that?
Well, you were talking about going to Brazil, Americans trying to medal.
Yeah, that's it. So in those days, you could see all the other gringos. Like we were basically all training at the same place. And you would end up hearing, oh, those guys are from California, from Ralph Gracie. Mm-hmm. Those guys are from Henzo's in New York, or those guys train with this guy. You know, you figured out, we'd all talk to each other. It's like we could see, okay, that guy doesn't look Brazilian.
Yeah.
You start talking, you figure out who's who. And then everyone kind of gets to know each other a little bit. And the worlds come. And each day as it's going on, gossip would come around. Oh, the blue belt from Ralph Gracie's, man, that guy took third place. He got to the podium. Or so-and-so somewhere else, one of the guys in Texas, one of the guys in the Machado team in California, whatever, you would figure out who was winning, or who even won more than one match. Mm-hmm. I mean, if they got to the quarters, if they got near the medal rounds, close to the podium, you would hear about it. We would talk about it. And when you looked at the results at the end of the competition, at all belt levels, blue through black. Now, keep in mind, at that time, there was only a couple American brown and black belts even competing, and maybe one would win a medal. Mm-hmm. And it was never gold. It was hardly ever gold at any belts. But you would say, oh, yeah, there was like 5 gringo medalists, a blue belt that took bronze, another one that took silver, a purple belt that took silver, one brown belt bronze, and whatever. And I mean, that's how hard it was. And you just kind of wanted to get to the podium. If you could just get to the podium, you felt pretty good about it back in those days. Mm-hmm. And my first year to go was 99. But then in 2000, I was there. I went every year. And that's when I watched BJ Penn win black belt gold medal. And he went there as a brown belt. It's a real famous story. They call him the prodigy for a reason.
Yeah.
He went through the ranks in jiu-jitsu extremely fast. He had this incredible ability, very flexible, great guard. He was doing wrestle ups, scrambling up from his guard and taking people down. And then he had good base and good top pressure for a featherweight. He was a featherweight. Mm-hmm. And he went as a brown belt, and he won. Like, you have to compete in a big team like that. You had to compete to earn your spot on the A team to compete in the world championships. And so literally at the worlds, it was just the best of the best at that time. And he earned his spot for the brown belt. And then I believe it was something like, hey, now go against our best black belt and see if you can win that match. And he did, and then got his black belt. And literally the next week, he's competing in his first tournament as a black belt, which was the World Championships, and he won.
Wow.
And then that was it. He's never had another black belt match since. He immediately went to MMA, got into the UFC, and that was it.
And now he just ran for governor of Hawaii.
Yeah. But he really, he was the first. Yeah. He was the first one. Came out of nowhere. I remember meeting him when he was a brown belt at the Pan Ams earlier that year in 2000. I won the Pan Ams as a blue belt. He was a brown belt, and he lost. He actually lost. I think he might have got into a fight actually in his match, and both guys were DQ'd. It was something like that. But he was in a hard match, and I don't remember how it went, but he did not win a medal. He got disqualified or whatever. And then, but I met him. I had a friend of mine introduce me to him because he had already started to get this attention, and people were talking about him, how good he was, and how he was giving really good guys a hard time back when he was just a purple belt, And he said hi to me. We talked a little bit. I just won, and he congratulated me. I wish I would have got a picture with him in that moment, but we didn't even. There's no phone.
Dude,
you don't have.
Dude, there is so much historical, amazing shit that's lost because I either had a BlackBerry
Right.
Or I had this like, Nokia thing. Like I can think back on so many like dope situations I was in where I was like, I can't believe that we didn't take pictures.
I was just talking about that with somebody else too. Now that I'm at this age, I do the kids these days are, I say, I do that phrase all the time for fun. But that was one of the things I was saying. Oh man, they're not even, they're green belts or whatever. And they're getting all this amazing footage and pictures. And,
it's unreal.
Yeah. But yeah, so I met BJ, so I knew who he was. And then the rumors start going around. Oh, the Gringo's in the finals. BJ's in the finals as a black belt. And I watched him win the finals. And in that moment, I told everyone around me, keep in mind, I'm a little kid. I'm 17 now at this point in time, but I'm just like, I'm going to be the next one. You wait and watch. I'm going to do it. I'm going to win here. And that's, I had my first life mission, what I knew I wanted to achieve as a man. I had that set in my mind by the time I was 16, 17 years old.
And then what happened?
We made it come true.
Yeah.
Yeah.
How long did it take?
So that was 2000 when I watched BJ do it, and I won in 2007.
So 7 years later, you won black belt at heavyweight?
Ultra heavyweight.
Ultra heavyweight?
Yes. Oh. Yeah. Yeah. I was a big kid. I still am, I guess.
Well, what do you like, 215, 220 now?
Right now, I walk around 220. I stay around 220. The thing was, first, I had no understanding of diet. I didn't know how to eat.
Seafood diet, right?
Yeah, basically.
Seafood,
I'm a
you
kid.
eat it?
I was a kid,
Dude, I believe me, I know it.
But the thing was for the juvenile division, the 16 and 17-year-olds, once you're like 180, it becomes ultra. It's over. And so I hit 200 pounds when I was 16.
Yeah.
And so I got used to not having a weight limit when I did the juvenile division. And then right after the 2000 Worlds, I got my purple belt. And once again, I'm not really used to a limit. Now I fell into this super heavy division, which was like 220 limit with the gi on. But I had already, like, there was some other 16, 17-year-old kids that were 230, 240, 250. In fact, the kid that beat me in 2000, his nickname was Big Mac. And he had that nickname for a reason. Yeah. He was a big kid. Good judo. He beat me by a takedown. And that's the same person that I fought in the finals 7 years later to win my black belt division. But he was probably 250 already when we were 17. And he was still 250 or more 7 years later when we were grown men. But anyways, as I was saying, I got used to not having a limit. And when I transitioned into the adult division, purple belt, I was super heavy. I went against Fabricio Verdum at the 2001 Pan Ams. I lost to him in the semifinals, but it was a good match. It was a competitive match. And then going into Brazil for the Worlds later that year, I was just like, whatever. I just eat. I'm growing. I just want to feed myself. And then I did ultra heavy at the Purple Belt Worlds in 2001, and I took third place in that as well. And like I said, I just got used to not having a limit. But then later, as I got to brown belt, I got too heavy. I started being like 230, 235. I was slow, and it wasn't the kind of game that I like to play. And I had a rough year. I started getting some losses I didn't feel like I should get. And I was like, you know what? I need to lean up. And I started taking strength and conditioning training more serious. I didn't really have access to anyone, of course not of your level, but even like a good, decent level. A lot of it I had to figure out on my own. And I started like doing research, and I figured out who Steve Maxwell was and some other people. And there was a really respected coach in Wichita, Kansas. His name is Bill O'Connor. And I was like 18, 19. And I heard about him, and I would drive up to Wichita and get plans and work out with him. And he would show me how to lift and some stuff. And I started trying to dive in on it. And then I I came back down. By the time I was like 19, I kind of got back to where I was around 195, 200 all the time. And I was pretty leaned up, and I really like took my physical condition serious at that point. And I had a good brown belt run at that weight. And then when I came to black belt, I was usually in that 200-pound range. Mm-hmm. But then I started training with Saulo and Shanji. And then now I had this situation where I have two teammates who are also around 200 pounds.
So you were already a black belt by the time you met them?
I was a brown belt when I met them.
And you met them in Columbus?
Yes.
At
2003, Arnold Gracie World Championships. It was a big no-gi pro competition. There was 3 divisions, 165 and under, 165 to 195, and then 196 and over. And I did the one up to 195, and Saulo was in that division. And I went against Saulo in the finals. And that's how I met him. Of course, I knew who he was. Obviously, I remember him the first time I went to Brazil in '99. I remember watching him compete. I remember the whole stadium chanting his name, Saulo, Saulo. I remember that, and just he was one of the greats.
Yeah.
In fact, he was the greatest of those first years. He was winning every single year, and he was the first one to be doing it at a different weight class every year. He kept kind of like Leandro Lo of this era. Saulo was doing that back then. And so anyways, I fought Saulo, and it was a good match, and that's how I met him. And then I saw him in Brazil later that year, and he invited me to train with him, and that just changed my life. But how was Saulo's jiu-jitsu style different than like the Machados and what you'd been exposed to? Well, man, Saulo, number one, some of the Machados were competitors. Obviously, Jean-Jacques has his amazing competition accomplishments, but Carlos wasn't so much of a competitor. And that's the one that I was spending the most time with, of course, because he was right next to me. I had gone to Jean-Jacques a couple of times when I was in California. His school, I believe, is Tarzana.
Yeah, out in the valley.
That's where we went a couple of times when I was like a purple belt. And he was amazing. I loved it, but I didn't have that access to him all the time. So I didn't really have anyone mentoring me as far as like what it means to be a champion, the attitude, the mindset, how to rise to the occasion when it's game day, and just also the preparation to lead up to that, to make sure you rise to the occasion on game day. My dad was he was a great teacher, and he was also a coach as well. And one thing he taught me was you got to work your ass off. He would tell me different things all the time, say things in my head. And of course I was watching him say it to everyone else around, all his fighters that he had and people that he was teaching and building up to compete. He used to say things that's just like, how bad do you want it? Like he would just push you really, he pushed me really hard, and he wasn't one to give a lot of praise. It was always, you can do better. And one other thing that he liked to say is it perfect or better? And
no, but that's the, it's the same time I grew up.
Yeah. It's that time.
I don't think I ever had anybody tell me I was doing anything right. I only knew when I was fucking like, I had to come to the realization if they weren't screaming at me, it was because I was doing it right.
Yeah.
And it was like, when I get into this, I talk about this to my wife constantly. She's like, more praise would be good. I'm like, I didn't grow up with a lot of praise. Mm-hmm. That was just different than how we were raised. And, within sports or martial arts or any of the stuff we did, it was like, if you weren't getting yelled at, you were probably doing something right.
Yeah.
And, it's just kind of a different thing. And I'm sure running a school now, people are like looking for praise, and you're like, man, I didn't grow up like this.
Yeah.
And not to say it's right or wrong. It's just, you feel at the margins of your experience.
Right. It's one of those interesting things because when you look back on it now, I'm sure you're super grateful for coming up in that time, and you could see how it molded you to who you are today. Definitely that kind of stuff made me really tough, made me not give up, and work hard. I developed a very strong work ethic, and it's not just because of what my dad was saying, but also because he was doing it too. He was training his ass off. He was sparring with everyone, working really hard. He used to wake me up at 6 a.m. and we would go do a run before I went to school. Or, when I got a little older, I got a gym membership, we would go to the gym. Or I would just get up and go to the gym before I went to school on my own when I got a car, stuff like that. Like, he was the influence, the example. And then he also pushed me. So my work ethic and everything was there. But my dad also wasn't really a competitor. He didn't have a sport to do. I mean, he boxed a little bit, and then he did a couple of jiu-jitsu tournaments, but it was hard. He was running the business.
Yeah.
And so he never developed fully the focus and the kind of the switch that you turn on to be a competitor.
So do you feel that Saulo was able to kind of mentor you into that?
He was my mentor for that. 100%. 100%. If it wasn't for him, I never would have. I mean, I was winning, I was doing good, but I was missing that extra piece to become a world champion. I was medaling at the worlds at blue and purple and brown, but I wasn't winning. I wasn't getting the gold. And he 100% took me to the next level. And I got my black belt in 2004. So we competed against each other in 2003. I got my black belt in 2004. And that was the year so we competed, we fought each other in March. I saw him in Brazil that year. He didn't compete that year, interesting enough. So it made him very approachable. I just saw him sitting there coaching. And I just got done competing, and I go and I tap him on the shoulder, and he turns around and he looks at me. Hey, my brother. He has this energy. Saulo has an amazing energy. And we just competed against each other a few months before. But I really earned his respect on that day. There was a vibe on that day. I beat one of his black belts in the semifinals to meet him in the finals. And no one knew who I was. I was just, a kid from Oklahoma. That was my very first pro tournament ever. But anyways, I made an impact on him. And then I see him there, and boom, he starts talking to me. He said, "Oh, where are you training?" I tell him where I'm training, and he's like, "Do you like it?" And I said, "It's okay." He's like, "Do you want to train with me?" I say, "Yes, I would love to train with you." He's like, "Where are you staying?" I tell him where I'm staying. He's like, "Here's my card. Call me on Monday. I'll come to your hotel and pick you up." I do all that. He comes to my hotel, picks me up. Sure enough.
And this is in Brazil.
This is in Brazil, in Rio. He had a school in Copacabana.
Oh yeah.
At that time. And so he comes and picks me up, and we go and train at his school. And this was, there was 2 worlds at this time. I know that sounds confusing. There was a World Cup, which was a professional organization. They had there were different teams that didn't really like the CBJJ. That's the IBJJF in Brazil, basically. Mm-hmm. It's the Confederação Brasileira de Jiu-Jitsu. And then they made a CBJJO, and they paid for the winners. Mm-hmm. And so some teams only did the CBJJO, and some teams only did the CBJJ, and then some teams did both. And I didn't have any tie. So I went there and I said, "Oh, there's 2. I'm going to go 2 weeks early, do this one, and then train and be sharper for the next one." And that's where I saw Saulo, was at the CBJJO one. And so then I had that time in between to be able to train with him to get ready for the next one. And so his whole team had just competed. He was one of the ones that did both. And so the first day we go, he's literally spending like 2 hours going over every single mistake that all his guys made, and like breaking down technical situation after technical situation and showing all of these things that I had never seen before and really had never been done in any of my experience in Brazil prior. I had never been in an environment like that where they were really delivering the goods.
Yeah.
They very much had like a pride kind of, give the gringos a little bit, but don't show them everything.
Oh, okay.
Because
yeah.
I can see it, right?
Yeah.
We're outsiders. A lot of us weren't even on their team, and we're in their house. And then some of us are going to compete against the other guys in that house, in that academy. And so they don't want to show everything to help the guys that might be competing against their guys a week later or whatever. And that's kind of the vibe that I was in every time I went to Brazil. You know, no one really wanted to help me because I might go against them or one of their teammates, and it is what it is. And I was a gringo. And so then I go to Solo's and he's just busting out the goods. And I remember I had one of my friends with me. He picked up me and my friend to go train. And I remember elbowing my friend. I was like, hey, can you believe he's doing this? Are you getting this? Remember that one. Remember that one. Don't forget that one.
Like, I wish I had a phone with a camera.
Yeah, yes. And it was just like hours. And then inside of that, he was also giving like a motivational speech and talking about mindset and all this stuff. And I was just like, well, and I could speak a little bit of Portuguese at that time. And I was like, I can't believe we're getting this. And then we literally went every day. And they invited us to eat lunch. You know, they were like very welcoming. And I couldn't believe it. And I trained with Solo, trained with Shanji. You know, and it was just like immediately had a big impact on me. And I remember rushing to the mall to get to a cyber cafe to write my dad an email and tell him about that experience.
Yeah.
And anyways, I stayed in touch with Solo. And then I said, man, the next time you go back to the US, please let us know. We would love to have you come to Oklahoma. It was like February 2004. Now the next year, he stays in touch. He lets me know, and he says, I'm going to come to the US. I'd like to make you the first stop before I go do my other places. So he literally came from Brazil straight to Oklahoma, and he had a seminar on Saturday. He arrived like Tuesday. Didn't need to do that. He could have arrived Friday night, did a seminar Saturday, left. He came on like Tuesday. I was in college at the time. I'm 19 going on 20. And, I'm 20 going on 21. I'm in college because my dad, I didn't like college at all. I did really good in high school. I was almost valedictorian of my class. I did really good in high school. As soon as high school was over, I was done. I just wanted jiu-jitsu. I just wanted to compete, fight, accomplish my goals. That was it. I did not enjoy college one bit. I wasn't in the scene. I never partied. I never did any of that. I didn't play any sports.
Well, I think you told me you didn't even have a drink until you were in your late 20s or early 30s.
Mid 20s, 25. Yeah. I was just 100% focused on my goals. So I did not enjoy college. Every second I was in college, I was just thinking about, I got to go train. I want to do other things. So anyways, Solo comes. He comes on Tuesday, and he's just hanging out and training with us every day, basically giving me free private lessons. He did have his own private lessons. But when it came to training with me, he was like, oh, let's go train. We trained for like 2 hours, bunch of rolls. He would show me stuff and was just so giving with his time. And then during that week, he's staying with my dad. I had an apartment, small apartment. We played chess. We're talking, we're hanging out. I remember he came over to my apartment one day, and I'm like showing him my matches, and I'm asking him, oh, what would you have done there? And we're watching video, and he's like, hey, what do you want? I said, I want to be a black belt world champion. And he's like, okay, why are you in college? And I'm like,
because my dad wants me to.
My dad wants me to. And he's like, you should just drop out. You should stop going to school and train full time. You can do it. He was one of the first people like that to say, you can do it. Go for it. And he's like, why don't you go to Brazil? Train with me and my brother every day. Train with our team there. Do all the competitions and go for it. And I'm like, yeah, that sounds good. I like that. I want to do that. And I couldn't get it out of my mind. And I was like, that's what I wanted to do. Now I have him telling me to do it. And I'm having him also tell me, go there and train, get all the access, all the competitions, everything. Right after he left, like a week later, I sit my parents down and have a conversation with them. And I tell them, look, I don't want to go to school. This is not what I want to do. That will be there forever. But I'm this age, this athletic ability right now. I'm ready to go. I can't look back and wonder what if. I need to go all in. I don't want to go to school anymore. And man, they were pretty resistant, especially my dad.
Yeah.
But then I'm like, hey, Dad, what'd you expect? You know what I mean? Look at you. You went all in. He's only did his passion. He was a professional organist. He's a musician. He loved music. He loves martial arts. I've only watched my dad live his passion. I never saw him work a regular 9 to 5. Yeah. I never saw him do anything he didn't want to do. And then he's telling me to go to school to become an accountant or a lawyer or whatever and make good money and be a professional. I'm like, that's not what I want to do, Dad. You know, I want to live my passion. And finally he got it. And then after some resistance, he said, okay, I understand, but you got to go back to school at some point.
Yeah.
That still hasn't happened yet. But everything worked out.
Yeah.
But
is your dad still alive?
He is.
Yeah. Is he still waiting? Like, hey, when are you going to go back to college?
He hasn't brought it up. I think, he saw, okay, business-wise, things are different now. We're doing good.
So my dad, one of the deals was that my dad was an attorney. My brother practiced. My other brother went to law school. So like that was kind of our family deal. So my dad was like, thought that because I hadn't gone to law school, like I hadn't completed everything. And I remember when I retired from the NFL, he's like, well, it's time to go back to law school. And I did not go. And so I remember right before he passed away, he's like, yeah. So that was always in the back of my mind.
Oh,
but
wow.
Yeah, I know what you're saying.
Yeah. Yeah. So you totally get it. But yeah, I dropped out of college, racked up a bunch of credit card debt, flew to Brazil and lived there for 4 months. Right then, like literally a month later.
Was this in Rio or?
Yeah, I lived in Rio. I had a sponsor, onthemat.com. They were kind of like the first group of gringos to go to Brazil and like document jiu-jitsu, film their own videos and they did like documentaries and follow teams and some of the guys that were coming up, the big name guys. And I loved that website. I loved what they were doing. And I used to order videos from them, and then they figured out who I was. I met them at some competitions and they started sponsoring me. And they had a connection house. So they basically had a house in Brazil that they advertised to gringos. If you want to go to Brazil to train or compete, you can stay in our house and we'll help set you up and let you know how it works. The main guy, the owner, his name is Scotty. He spoke Portuguese and he was and he knew what was going on. He lived in Brazil. And so they made it easier for gringos to come, especially if you were going by yourself. You kind of want a friend, in a third world country. So the house was there and he basically just said, hey, just pay the bills. And you can stay in the house, free of charge. Like I didn't have to pay rent. Yeah, I just dropped everything and went, and that was it, all in. And that was 2004. I was still a brown belt. I got my black belt when I came back home. And then a couple years later, I was black belt world champion because of Saulo. Of course, Shanji too. Shanji at that time, we were more like training partners. He wasn't really teaching. He wasn't a coach. He wasn't the leader that he is today yet. We were both coming up,
Sure.
And that made it amazing too, because Saulo was still competing, but Saulo was the teacher, the coach, the everything. He was the mentor, the guru, the older brother, almost like an uncle.
He's got to be what, 50?
No,
probably
getting there.
Yeah, he's probably pretty close.
Actually, he is. Yeah, you're right. He's 9 years older than me. Yeah. And I just turned 40. I forgot.
Yeah. So he's the age of my older brothers.
Yeah. So
Shanji is what, like 7 years?
7 years younger than Saulo. So Saulo beat us up. He led everything and he told us what to do. And we just listened to Saulo.
That's exactly what Victor said.
Yeah.
That Saulo beat the shit out of him.
Oh yeah. He beat the shit out of everybody. Yeah. Everybody around. Everyone was scared to death of Saulo. Just like they were scared to death of my dad. So I had like another scary dad, and this one happened to be Brazilian, little crazy, and was a world champion multiple times. But I was prepared for it. I was ready for it. I was ready for that like tough love, never get any praise. Even when you do good, you actually did bad. I was ready for that. My dad prepared me, but yeah, so Salo was still competing. So I got to be around in this amazing time where Salo's legacy had already been made. And he's kind of at the end of his competition era. And then Shanji's now coming up in his, and Shanji was a little ahead of me. He got his black belt a couple years before me. And he was already doing good, but he hadn't won his first world championship yet. Mm-hmm. His first world championship, he won in 2004, the same year that I went and lived in Brazil for 4 months. I trained with Shanji every single day, multiple times a day when he went on that run. Mm-hmm. And I was still a brown belt. And then I got my black belt. And then a couple years later, now I'm winning everything. And I become a world champion. And so it's just a beautiful experience. And just the fact that I got so close to them. And I am forever grateful. Like I can get emotional if I really sit and think about it and talk about it. Cause now we're 20 years. This is 20 years ago. Like Salo never asked me to pay him $1, not $1 for a class, for anything. And the very first time I went, because they also, oddly enough, I was born in Ohio. They had a home base in the U.S. Their first home base in the U.S. was in Ohio, in Toledo, Ohio, of all places. Rough.
Yeah, no, I've been to Toledo. It's not what I would think about as a destination here in America,
especially for a Brazilian
coming from Rio to Toledo.
Yes.
Oh boy.
But in 2005, they started kind of like transitioning more to staying in the U.S. full time.
What? How was it like? Why Toledo?
They already had a network there. So
gotcha.
I think the very first time Salo came to the U.S., he did a seminar tour across the Midwest and just kind of planted some seeds that grew. And so he already had a home-based school set up there. And so in 2005, Salo was like, hey, why don't you come out to Ohio and do training camp with us for the Pan Ams and for everything that was coming up? And I'm like, okay. And I remember going and being so nervous because number one, it's like, I'm just with them now. There's not like a team or whatever. And I didn't even know where I was going to stay. I was like, all right, I'm coming. But I am back in my mind. I'm like, am I getting a hotel? Like, is he going to have me stay with somebody else? Like, what's going to happen? And him and Shanji just had this little 2-bedroom apartment, 1 bathroom, small apartment there. And he picked me up from the airport. And sure enough, we go right to his place, to their apartment. And he's like, yeah, you'll just, he had like a little mattress he put on the floor in the living room. He's like, yeah, you stay there. I'm like, okay. Never asked me for one thing. And so I'm much love to Salo and Shanji as well, of course. But he changed my life.
This episode of Power Athlete Radio is powered by Train Heroic, the most immersive strength training app experience on the market.
We've built our online training business by partnering with Train Heroic and helping us deliver all of our world-class training programs like Jack Street, Field Strong, and Grindstone. To learn which Power Athlete training program best suits your goals, head to powerathletehq.com/training.
And if you're a coach looking to build a business with the best tech and training, go to trainheroic.co/powerathletehq. And now back to the show.
I can think of all the guys that trained me when I was young. Obviously the NFL was a little bit different, but coming up through it, people never asked me for anything. Just come in and work hard, and like working hard was the receipt, and the way you repaid them was by taking the knowledge and doing something great with it. Mm-hmm. And like I always think there's a really interesting thing with like mentorship and that, where all of a sudden once money starts changing hands, and there's like a weird sense of entitlement, and like all of a sudden it changes into a business relationship more so than like a mentor deal.
Yeah.
And and then also you're giving your time, which is valuable. Right. So like now I'm like
you're putting a price on your own.
Yeah. It's just like working with Victor and these guys. Mm-hmm. Same deal. Like the only thing I ask is just come in and work hard.
Yeah.
Like they've never come in and been like, we're not doing this today or this. I mean, that's why I don't really want to train NFL players and professional athletes anymore. There was just a weird sense of entitlement, and what happens when money starts changing hands.
Yeah.
And you just want, like be the best. Just go out there. Like seeing what Victor did at Worlds was like, and I know, as we were there, it was like like proud parents. You know, I saw the look on you and Shanji's face, and like feeling like, you know, here's somebody we've invested in, and to see him go out and do that. Like, I mean, you were the first person that jumped out of your seat when he had won. So it was neat to see, and it was neat to be a part of for me, you know, because it's a new world for me. Yeah. But also seeing how, you know, that they're good kids and they're not fucking assholes.
Yeah, it's the most important part.
Which is it really interesting with this generation of kids. You know, there's a weird sense of entitlement in social media, and I want everything now. And to meet kids that aren't like that is very rare. It's nice.
Yeah, for sure.
What do you think Salo? I mean, obviously he had a certain work ethic and a mindset. You know, what I know of Shanji and, you know, the stories of Salo, I've never met him. Hopefully one day we can get him here on the podcast. But very cerebral. Like his approach to it was different. Like, what is it about him that was so different?
Well, he was super complete. And remember that he did move up the weight classes. And so he was a world champion the first time as a lightweight, and then would go all the way up to super heavy. So he had just this incredible understanding of all the different games and styles. And he was so complete. He could pull guard. He could take down good takedown guys. And he could pass the best guards. He had incredible top pressure. He trained a lot of judo, which is very common for guys from Manaus to come up as kids training judo and then transition into jiu-jitsu. But he always spoke about the time that he spent with Rickson. It was something like he was supposed to go to train with Rickson for like a week or 2 weeks. I don't know. So, a very short amount of time, like 6 days, and then it turned into like 6 months. He just stayed. He didn't leave. And he spent an extensive amount of time with Rickson and had this incredible life-changing, kind of game-changing experience. And he was already a world champion at that time. But the way that he spoke about it is just like Rickson was on another level. And I think that was his kind of moment that elevated him to another level within his own practice. And he just, I mean, number one, he was a smasher. His pressure was insane, and he had this kind of tank body, a little wider, shorter, much different than Shanji and myself. You know, Shanji was kind of like an in-between. So Shanji's a little taller than Salo, of course, but not as tall as me. So we kind of had these different bodies. But Salo was just, he's an amazing expert at understanding, like, this is what you do. I'm not going to let you do what you want to do. You're not going to get anywhere. You want this, and I know how to shut it down to where you can't do the thing that you love to do the most. I can neutralize you. He always neutralized first and foremost. He taught me this. And then once you don't have what you want and you're trying to figure out now what your plan B is, and now you're going outside of what you're best at and say, okay, none of this works. Now I got to go over here and try this or whatever. He would see your mistake. He would see the opening that you literally kind of opened up yourself. And then once you made a mistake and he got a little bit ahead of you, there was no coming back. And he would just throttle you from then on. And he was so good at looking at everybody and saying, oh, I know how to play this guy. I know how to play him. I know how to play them. I know what to do with that game. I know what to do with this game. And it always had the most simplest answer. He could bring it down to the simplest little thing that you wanted to overcomplicate. Oh, but I could do all these things here to try to stop that. And he's like, no, why don't you just do this? And it's like, oh, yeah, you're right. That works. That's perfect. And his body positioning and awareness inside of that, he knew where to be right when he had to be there, and he could take up the smallest amount of space, and he could keep you from getting the smallest amount of space. It's just incredible. His defense, if you did happen to get into a good position, maybe he let you, right? Or we did specific training and we started there. You would feel helpless, even though you were in the dominant position in the better place. He could make you feel helpless, like, well, I can't do anything with this. There's nothing here. Even though I'm in a good place, there's still nothing here. And once again, you would kind of like, and then you're looking for something to do, and he would escape. Shanji's defensive awareness, Shanji's frames, his ability to create space and survive under pressure, mine as well. I mean, we were both greatly influenced by Salo. I mean, he was our master. And but then we're at the same time, Shanji and I are both developing our own styles and our own ways. And then now we have these three minds working together, and then we helped each other evolve a lot collectively. But Salo was just like, he didn't make mistakes. And if you made one, it was done. It was over. And beyond that, as a competitor, he really could get inside your head. He knew how to break you. He knew how to make you question yourself inside of a match where maybe it was two top level guys, even skills, even physical ability, everything like that. He could get you here. He beat you here. And then it would show itself in, in the technique and everything else. But it was amazing. I'd never, still to this day, I haven't seen or experienced something like that. It's just, for me, he has the closest thing to perfect jiu-jitsu. I mean, I would say I've trained with Hajar. I've spent time with Hajar, and very much the same. Shanji's like that too. I mean, of course, Shanji's the same.
One of my favorite moments, and this is purely just because I've experienced this myself. I watched Hajar Gracie on Lex Friedman's podcast, and he was up there talking this. And then the minute that Lex asked him about Shanji, his entire demeanor changes. And at that moment, I even said to Shanji, I was like, I knew I was in the right place.
Yeah,
because I do that to people. There are guys that I played against that were in the Hall of Fame, whatever, and I'm sure in the same way. So, and the fact that Shanji competed at such a high level, I mean, but
real recognize real.
Oh, yeah, no, I mean, it's good. And what I appreciate, especially with Shanji, whenever we talk about it or he demos things, he always gives you a practical application. Like, hey, I use this at this.
Right.
And so there's a lot of like steeping and grounding in it. And it's very simple.
Yeah.
He's like, we don't do anything complex. He's like, it's very classic. It's very pressure heavy. It's very close. Like he got into this whole thing about like different styles of jiu-jitsu, and these guys do this. And he's like, we do the classics, we do the basics. It's side control, it's pressure, it's smash.
But what you grow to understand is like the simple being so greatly effective with the simple is incredibly complex.
Oh.
It's incredibly complex, and people, they can't see it like that. It's difficult. I think it takes so many revolutions, right? Of like the 10,000 hours, the mastery, as you go through over and over and over again. Like, how many years have you been training athletes? From yourself being an athlete to now all these rotations, these decades of you hitting 10,000 plus hours over and over and over, mastery. Now you can take a simple lift, a simple exercise, and you're seeing things that you didn't see or maybe not even need to see before because you're young or whatever.
Well,
right?
I had a really unique experience in that I retired from the NFL, or actually I got hurt in my 10th year in the NFL, came home and had surgery, and I was sitting on the couch. Greg Glassman, who started CrossFit, called me on the phone and asked me if I would come help them develop their tech on how to train athletes. And I think 30 days later, we launched a website, we launched a program. I didn't know shit about programming. I didn't know anything about training athletes. And then 30 days later, I put the program in, and it got like 17,000 hits. And all of a sudden, people had a buzz, and they were like, you got to teach a seminar. So I had to come up with a seminar on the fly, went and taught it. And then I taught 36 seminars that next year.
Wow.
And proceeded to teach hundreds of seminars around the globe. And every weekend, I got 20 to 50 new people. And over time, you see that many people fast, you end up just developing a system in real time. Yeah. And I look for patterns, like not in a autistic, but more like an OCD kind of way. But you start looking at things, and then, you're giving away free program, and you're watching people, they're coming to the seminar. The people that are doing your stuff can do all of this stuff. And then you sit down and you're like, what am I trying to do? And for me, it was fostering and developing athleticism. I had this idea of challenging posture, position, and using the model of athleticism. And I knew how to do it based off of axes of rotation, movement, planes of motion, like we did yesterday. We were doing something sagittal, Then all of a sudden we did something rotational, and I started creating all these training systems, and then I'd push them out for free. And there were thousands of people doing the program that were giving me input. So in a way, I was able to do probably the equivalent of 20 PhDs and 700, hundreds of podcasts talking to people like yourself and the smartest people to ever walk the earth, and going out and teaching people all over the world. And,
but that was still decades ago. Right?
Well, yeah.
So now, how many times through?
It's the amount of practical application working with people in real time. There's no way to replicate it.
And
it's kind of like what you're talking about.
Right.
You're picking up a phone book trying to get to Brazil and get there. And these, I mean, it's you're talking about an experience that could almost never be recreated.
Yeah.
And the other one is that you're at an age where you're going to roll 3-4 times a day. As a father and a business owner and this, I know you train a ton, but it's not like you're just sitting around, eating cereal and being like, oh, you want to go out in the garage and roll? And it's like a different time. But you brought up the 10,000 hours. I would love to have seen like how many hours it took you to go from like, when you thought you were pretty good, training with like, within the Machado kind of deal. And then you meet Salo and them and it kind of takes you to this. I wonder like how much time the blocks were if you could sit down and quantify them. It's way more than 10,000 hours.
Oh yeah. Yeah, for sure. And I mean, now this is my 19th year as a black belt. So I think about how many hours I've hit just as a black belt. I'm more than double the amount of time as a black belt than what I was not as a black belt.
Yeah.
In my jiu-jitsu journey. And, it's amazing. I still feel like I'm getting better all the time. I'm still learning, evolving. I mean, jiu-jitsu itself as a whole is constantly evolving, but then me in my own personal practice and what I do, technically in my vision, the way I see, the way I communicate, all of that I feel is consistently getting better every single day, week, month, year. I'm older now for sure. Just turned 40. But I still think even me now at 40 beats me 5 years ago, 35. I mean, the 21-year-old kid that got his black belt, oh my God, I would smash that kid. What,
if you could define your style, you talked about Salo in terms of being very cerebral, a lot of pressure in this and different stuff. If you could describe your style compared to like Salo, Shanji, like how do you define yourself?
Well, it's very similar. In many ways, but then very different in others. We have the same philosophy, the same principles as far as the timeless style. That's what I love to preach, timeless jiu-jitsu. That's
dude. If you guys don't follow his Instagram, and if you're into jits, you need to, because I'll actually watch it before class, and then I try to whatever. If you're showing something, I try to use it in class that day, and it's actually paid good dividends for me.
Yeah, that's awesome. And you told me a story.
Dude, your X choke was great.
We got to circle back to that because I have an amazing story for you on that. But the timeless, I think like if you look at all the greats in any sport, even in the arts, artists, they talk about how they come back to the fundamentals, the basics, and they think, oh, I need to do this at the highest level possible because that's what's going to stand the test of time. And they get so good at a simple, but they get so good at that it becomes unstoppable, right? And it transcends the different generations that come and are in their face or whatever, years and years and years, throughout years and years and years, and they can still work. They can still fire this off. Michael Jordan was a huge inspiration to me. But when he stopped being able to fly and jump over everybody, I mean, he still could a little bit. What did he get so good at? That fadeaway jumper, that simple fadeaway jumper, and some of the just basic ways that, he could read and set up, all that stuff. So Salo and Shanji are very much in line with, they inspire me to be that way 100%. I was kind of the modern guy in the group between the three of us. I explored a lot of the different games, and I would try different things and kind of come to them, and every now and then I would find something that worked really well for me, and they would kind of get into it and want to play with it a little bit, but they were a little more fix already. And I was, just because of how I came up, learning from so many different people all the time, traveling here, traveling there, I was very open to receiving any new technique or information and trying it. So I was more of the experimenter. I studied a lot of video, and a lot of times they would come and ask me, hey, how does this game work? Or what does that guy like to do? I mean, Shanji talks about this all the time. I could cite the year, the match. You tell me a technique, I can think of like a moment, like in competition where that technique was used, who did it, what year it was, I was like a nerd. I'm a jiu-jitsu nerd. Mm-hmm. And that kind of stemmed from all those notebooks and everything that I was doing, the way I came up. And so my game, I had some good things, but then I had a lot of holes when I started training with Solo and Shanji. And at the same time, I was still finding new things when they were already they did what they did. So I kind of got this nice little mix of all the different people that inspired me, people that I trained with, competed against, the games that I ran into, the games that I tried, all these different things. And that's kind of me, but the core of who I am is the same as them. The timeless style, pressure. We must have a good guard that needs to be dangerous. You need to be dangerous off your back. Mm-hmm. You need to be able to attack submissions. A lot of the game nowadays, as far as the bottom game, the guard game, is just to score because of the evolution of the sport, to put points on the board and be the first to score. And there's not as many submission-oriented, dangerous guards out there as what there was in my days coming up. But we must be dangerous off our back. We must be able to finish. We do need to have the capacity to sweep somebody, of course, to score. And if we can't finish them off our back, we're going to finish them in a dominant position. So then we will get on top and then have incredible pressure that can melt through any guard that exists by making them tired, because the flexible, dangerous guards that exist and ones that can kind of tie you up, the only way you're going to pass them is with pressure, by making them tired, getting their legs tired and getting them to a point where there's no coming back, right? And so a lot of that ends with mounting, getting in their half guard, mounting them, smothering them, and finishing them with a basic technique, a basic submission. And the goal is to not move backwards at all. Once I'm on top and I'm in a good spot and I'm there is no coming back. The finish may still be several minutes away, several steps away, but it's inevitable. Just like chess. If you're with a grandmaster, playing chess against a grandmaster, a master, whatever, if they're higher level than you, you have no chance, especially once they've gotten to a certain point in the game. You can't win.
Sure. And
that's the goal, to be that precise and that efficient with your movements that you don't go backwards. And on top of that, what they taught me,
I always think with chess, they memorize every single movement. Like, hey, if you start here, yes. And it's like they've seen everything. Let's say there's
the responses,
the there's
reactions.
Like 54,000 variations that they go to, and I wonder, and obviously my jiu-jitsu journey is very new. I constantly think about it like that, where I'm like, and then this is how I'm going to start, and then like this,
I call it the funnel.
Yeah,
there's a million ways the match can go in the beginning. I pull guard, you stand left leg forward or right leg forward. You like to wrestle takedown or judo takedown, whatever. Well, there's so many variables and options once it starts. As soon as we lock up and we begin, the goal is to make the game smaller and shorter and smaller and shorter, to where once I get to that point, you're in my funnel. Mm-hmm. You're in my best positions where I understand all your reactions, your responses. I know what you're feeling. I know what you're thinking. I can see it. I can feel it. I'm going to be a step ahead of you every way throughout until the funnel comes to the very end, and you're going to get submitted one of three different ways. Mm-hmm. For me personally, it's a cross choke from mount or an armbar from mount, a kimura, or something on your back, like an RNC or a collar choke from the back. So we try to kind of just take all your pieces and then put you in checkmate. The most dominating way possible. That's Salo style. Domination. To take all your pieces, beat you in every position, and then show extreme dominance by submitting you from mount with cross choke. That's what he did to me over and over and over and over.
And you knew it was coming and you still couldn't stop it?
And he would judo throw me so hard and smash me and choke me and finish me, and I have to get up. And these days when we were in Ohio, as I said, it was just the three of us. And I was living with them. I was staying in their apartment. And we were all, me and Shanji were both scared to death of Salo. And we had no idea what.
Are you guys still scared of Salo?
No, not at all. Not at all.
Because Arash was scared to death of him when he met Salo.
He should be. If you're not at a level, you should be scared of Salo.
Okay.
It's so amazing. It's so amazing. I got an amazing story for you later. But, Salo would say when he would just decide, okay, whenever he got up, that's when we went and trained. We didn't know what time it was going to be. We didn't know what was going on. He'd get up, boom. We had no idea what the training was going to be like. You didn't know anything until Salo said what we were going to do. And then we would start. You didn't know when it would end. He would say, okay, now we got enough rounds. We would just go so hard every single day, 4 hours, and just the three of us and the bike. The bike was the way to make it 4, right? Because there's 3 of us. So when 2 people were in, the other one was on the bike. And the Airdyne.
Oh, the Airdyne.
Airdyne. Okay. And if Salo and Shanji were
going.
I love them.
I am a true Airdyne fan. The concentric. Yeah.
What's funny is I grew to hate it so much, but now I have one at my house and I do it every day.
Me too.
It's
I've been in the gym. I have them there. I just got new ones, the Echo bikes.
Yes,
so
I have the Echo too. Rogue
I
Echo.
have the old assault bikes that I've tuned up, and then I'm going to drop them off at the boys' house at Victor and Arash, and then also at Philippe's house.
Nice.
So they have one.
Yeah. And then you're going to make them FaceTime you and show you.
And I'll be like, you got to do your zone 2. We got to do intervals. You got to do this.
Yeah. So, and if Salo did not hear those blades going the way they should, he would stop in the mat in the round with Shanji and yell at me and tell me, pick it up, go. What are you doing? Just with a lot of cuss words and demoralizing language. And so then I would jump in. And at some point, I'm going to go back to back, right? I'm going to be in, go with Shanji. And then Shanji's going to go out. Salo's going to come in and go with me. And so, I'm a new black belt. Shanji's a world champion, becoming the best in the world. He's about to be a multiple time absolute world champion. Salo is Salo. And then there's little me, right? And I'm obviously the weakest link in this room. And my good round of everything that I had was maybe me not getting submitted in a 10-minute round or just getting submitted once, right? But then that's everything I got. And guess who's about to come out next with a 30 seconds rest? Salo. And with no mercy whatsoever. However tired I was, I remember I couldn't even grip. I remember just being broke. He would just throw me down, try to make me tap by smother, by pressure. And not one time did I ever tap from pure pressure. And I think if I ever did,
he would have thrown you out.
It would have been it. Would have been over.
I don't think you should tap from pressure. It sucks.
It sucks really bad. It can suck really bad. I know why people do it. And if I've had students tap because of that, and I would stop them right there and I give them a motivational speech.
Yeah.
And I tell them, hey, you can survive this. You can do this. What can you focus on? Focus on this little inch that's there. Make that inch a little bigger. Get a little more space. Get things back in. Get to home base. Breathe. Stay calm. I give him that. Salo never gave me that talk. Yeah. I never got one positive motivational speech from Salo. If it was a motivational speech, it had a little bit of a
get your fucking head out of your ass.
Yeah, kind of a thing.
Yeah. I grew up with 2 older brothers too. I know the deal.
But he would just whip my ass so bad. And yeah, but I survived. And anyways, that was when I said, I want to be able to do that to everybody else. You were talking about my game development, my style, the difference of all of our styles and stuff. It was in that moment. And he literally had the best style to deal with someone like me. My long, flexible, I was a guard player coming up. People know me now as all this pressure. But when I first got my black belt, I was a guard guy. I was a guard kid. I was one of those guys that wanted to pull guard every match, and I won with my guard. I had a pretty good little outside pass, and if I got to side control, I'd try to kimura you. Mm-hmm. And that was my thing. Or a Bravo choke. I had a good little Bravo choke too. I didn't know how to mount. I didn't really understand what real pressure was until my time with Salo and Shanji. And when I felt what they were doing to me, I said, man, I need this in my arsenal. I want to be able to do this to other people. And that's when I grew to start developing my pressure, learn and understand and make my own pressure with my own body type and style. And so I was already a black belt before I really made that circle back to the mount, and start that mastery process. But that's what I love to do the most nowadays. And I've gone through my guards so many times. I know what serves me best as far as going with these young kids, what guards I can go to, and how I move. I got rid of a lot of stuff. I don't do everything that I used to do. It's simpler, but not. And the other thing that I learned from Salo and Shanji was just having incredible defense. The way they could survive these bad positions because they were literally putting each other there all the time. And we did a lot of specific training. I didn't have a lot of experience with specific training until them. We would always, every one of those days in Ohio or whatever later on when we were in San Diego and they moved there, there was always some specific training in every single session. Whether it was escapes, starting someone on your back, side control, mount, half guard smash, stuff like that, starting with specific guards, starting in situations where we need to score in a short amount of time, different things like that. We did a lot of specific training, and I think that is so valuable for your progression, especially if you're in a room where you're better than everybody. You must do specific training.
We do it. That's the majority of our stuff is very situational specific. Yeah. Hey, we're doing this. We're very free. It's actually very rare that we actually do kind of like open mat from the deal. It's always situational. Yeah. And that's the same stuff we did in the NFL. Yeah. Like these are situations. This is, first and 10, second and third, red zone and this. So for me, it makes a ton of sense. Yeah. Because, I don't know how anybody else does it, but that's, because I'm only trained at one other place. I did when I was up in Montana. I went to the Straight Blast gym. And it was funny because Shanji asked me, he's like, oh, what was Gringo Jiu-Jitsu like? And my only thing was there was no hugs. It's not jiu-jitsu unless there's like 25 hugs, because Philippe hugs me. Everybody had it's just a lot of hugs. Yeah. And so, but it's an interesting family environment that once you get into it, it just like you almost feel like if you don't show up, people are going to call you, and people do. If I miss class, people are like, how come you weren't there? Yeah. I was coming for you. Yeah. Yeah. Earlier in our conversation, you asked what it was about jiu-jitsu or why jiu-jitsu. That is why. Of course, the art itself is amazing, beautiful. You can give your whole life to it and still keep learning. What else is like that? It's just incredible how you can live jiu-jitsu and then how you can plug it into your everyday life. All the lessons, the themes of being a forever student and being able to stay calm under pressure, controlling your breathing, problem solving, patience. All these things is life. But then you talk about the community, the people, and they're all going through this incredible transformation as well because of what jiu-jitsu does for your life. And then the energy on the mats just becomes
so special because we're all doing this individually, but then as a family, together. And 100%, at this stage in my life where I can look around and I can see guys, my students, my training partners, Shanji, all these incredible people that have now been in my life for decades, 10 years, 15, 20 plus, 25. I mean, I have one of my most OG black belts in Oklahoma. He's been training with me for 25 years. We were kids. We grew up together.
Wow.
And man, that brotherhood, the family, the community, it's like that's my family. And I mean, when you love what you do and you're with people that you love as you're doing it, the love is just, that's why we hug each other so much.
Yeah.
And we beat the shit out of each other too.
Do you think growing up as an only child, meeting Shanji and Salo and them kind of like adding you as like a third brother kind of filled something in a lot of ways? Because I mean, I grew up with two older brothers and I can't imagine not having my older brothers. I mean, we live out here in Texas. They're still back in California. I still talk to my brother at almost, every day, if not every other day. We text all the time. But like that kind of camaraderie and that shared suffering and what you guys went through, like that kind of added a piece to your life that maybe you've been missing. Definitely.
And also just like, I didn't have a lot of extended family around either. So, it was kind of the type where my dad also became a father figure to a lot of the students when I was younger. He helped a lot of people and he brought them, if someone didn't have a place for Thanksgiving or Christmas, they would come over to our house and eat Christmas dinner with us or whatever. And he was very opening and welcoming to help people and be that other thing. We're not just teaching martial arts, right? We have to be there to help people through life. And he did that. And so I naturally grew close because I was in the school every day. I mean, my dad had to be there every day and I wanted to be around my dad. And so I would naturally be at the school and I would train and do all the classes that I could. And if I wasn't doing something, I was just hanging out there, and I naturally am around the other students all the time. And they were my brothers and sisters. That was the family. And it's just grown. And now, I mean, literally worldwide, I have people that I've been doing jiu-jitsu and stayed in contact and seen at events and tournaments and all that stuff that come to train with me in my home. I've trained with them at their home all over the world for a long, long time. And that's just another layer to it. I mean, you have the ones close to you, and then then there's the surrounding states, and then it just kind of goes all the way out to worldwide. I mean, I have some really, really good friends in Europe and obviously Brazil, people that, you share blood, sweat, and tears with. It takes it up a notch. I mean, it doesn't matter. Maybe we don't talk to each other every day, right? But as soon as we see each other, we're around each other. It's just this incredible energy. And that's one of the best parts about what I do. Obviously, it's the people. And the fact that I can literally go anywhere in the world and there's probably someone right there that I already kind of consider family, anywhere. And if not, if it happens to be a place where there isn't that person, it probably won't take me very long to plant the seed and start that relationship with somebody new. And then next thing you know, years pass, and then we look back and we say, oh man, remember how we met or whatever? Is random, this and that. It's freaking beautiful.
Obviously the jiu-jitsu and the martial arts influenced you. What was the move to MMA?
Well, that was me tapping into the younger me, the JKD me, the complete martial artist me. Of course, jiu-jitsu came along and I loved it so much and I set my goals and it was my passion. But the whole while I was doing the sport of jiu-jitsu, I knew that at some point as a martial artist, I had to fight MMA. And I didn't know how much I would do. I just knew that, okay, I at least got to do one. Like I have to do at least one. Who am I as a martial artist? If I never had any sort of street fight or confrontation literally the first fight I ever had in my life was my first professional MMA fight.
Wow.
And so I'd always kind of wondered, and of course I trained with a lot of fighters. We had our own fighters, and it was just like, okay, it's time for me. As soon as jiu-jitsu started to not give me the fire, where I was a little too comfortable. I was going against the same guys all the time, the same tournaments. I wasn't always extremely inspired. You know, that there was some days where I would show up at an event and I kind of was only there because I felt like I needed to be there.
Sure.
Because that's what I did. From the time I was 15 to 31 is when I had my first MMA fight. It was Pan Ams and Worlds, you know, or some variation. Okay, I'm going to Brazil, compete there, then the Worlds. And Worlds every single year. And it just kind of started to lose its fire, and the game was evolving a little bit too, to where some things were happening that just made it less fun. Like the ability to stall, 50-50 was coming around, and some of these things where I was just like, man, I remember having a couple of tournaments where I really kind of like felt like, man, I actually want to hit somebody. I wish I could hit you.
No.
You know? And that's when it really hit me. It's like, okay, it's time for MMA. Let's do it. New challenge, out of the comfort zone. Let's start over. And while I still have my body and some good athletic ability, let's put it towards something different. And I did my first fight. And actually, right after that fight, like a month later, I received my first major injury. The only surgery I've ever had in my life is a pec tear. That was actually with training with Shanji. I was getting ready for a big professional jiu-jitsu match, and I was overdoing it, and I wasn't getting the rest I should have. And now I'm like in my 30s. I just turned 31, and he was yanking my arm for a kimura, and it barely even moved. It wasn't anywhere near finishing range. It just pop, that much, pop, and my pec tendon completely tore off the bone. And so for the first time in a long time, the pause button got put on, and I just did my first fight. And then now I'm recovering, and I'm thinking, man, I might not come back the same. I'm in my 30s. What am I going to do? Because I'm going to need to start to zero in. I made the mistake of fighting MMA and going right back to jiu-jitsu tournaments like nothing happened. And obviously MMA is a different animal.
Sure.
The training camps, the mental stress, everything. So I was like, I need to be more careful and focused with my energy and what I'm doing when it comes to competition. And that MMA fight scared me so much that when I had the time to really, when I was recovering and I just really thought about it, it was like, I need to do that again. I want to conquer that fear. And so I said, yeah, I got to do another one. And then I did my second fight at the end of 2015, a little over a year later. My shoulder recovered. And then the event that I was fighting for, Legacy, they started talking about a title fight, stuff like that. And then I didn't really like MMA too much as far as like being violent. And obviously, like I said, it was a very scariest thing I've ever done is getting locked in the cage, you know? But what I noticed was the time in the camp, I was putting together all the greatest relationships of my martial arts journey. So I had my Muay Thai MMA coach, who is one of my jiu-jitsu black belts today and someone that I've been training with for 15 years. You know, that's a brother. I have Salo and Shanji, of course, especially Shanji. He was in all my training camps. He was in my corner for all my fights. I have my strength and conditioning coach. I have my wrestling coach, another person I've trained with for many years. My father. All these people are in my corner and closest, you know, literally the closest relationships I have are coming together to be there for me. And they were doing that in the camp. And these are people that all have crazy schedules. Literally, the only way we're going to get these group of people together in one place is a wedding, a funeral, or a fight.
Yeah.
Right. And then I started to see that, and I started to really enjoy the training camps and the time that we would spend together. And I also found a really special zen on fight night for MMA backstage before walking out. Jiu-jitsu, I would be really nervous. You know, you kind of run through all the different what ifs and scenarios and this game, that game, multiple matches. I got to fight this guy, then I'm gonna have to deal with that guy, then that guy, da-da-da-da. This is one guy, one fight. We go in there, we give everything we got. It's complete chaos. It's so chaotic that you can't overthink anything. You can't, I mean, obviously you have your strategy, but I found this zen where it's like, I'm just going to trust. I'm going to trust that I have these people in my corner. I'm going to trust the lifetime of training and work that I put in. And we're going to go in there and, you know, we're going to do what we got to do to get this victory. It's do or die, you know? And I fell in love with MMA. And I actually deeply believe that that's competitively, that's what I'm best at. It just put together all my trainings, all my lessons, all the people, everything of my whole life into one moment, one expression of who I am. And that's why I kept going. And then I was like, well, I gotta try to go to the top. Let's try to become an MMA world champion. And we did it together.
So then you had a bit of a setback. Well, I guess you could call it minor. I mean, anything but you were on this ascending deal. And then all of a sudden before world champion title fight, you go in for your physical and.
Yes. Every fight I had done, I had 9 fights prior to the Bellator World Championship fight. Every single fight, obviously, there's the state, their set of requirements.
Like the boxing commission.
Yeah, the commission. Their set of requirements to get approved to fight. You know, is always like some sort of blood work, physical, drug tests, things like that. And that was that. The world title fight, the only states in the U.S., I believe, Las Vegas may be a third, but the 2 that I know for sure is California and New York.
Yeah.
They're the only 2 that require a brain scan, an actual brain scan done pre-fight to get approved to fight. The world title fight was going to be in London, and they also require a brain scan. But I never fought in a state that required it before, so this is the first time for me to get a brain scan done. I had never been knocked out, no concussions, no issues. I don't even get headaches. I don't suffer from anything that would make me think, oh, you know, maybe I should get my head checked out. And I'm like 6 weeks away from the fight. I'm right in my camp, literally moving to like phase 2, the hardest phase of the camp. And I go to get my brain scan done. And long story short, come to find out that I have a brain condition that is actually due to a genetic disorder. The condition is called cavernoma. It's actually kind of nowadays, it's like people refer to it as a cavernous malformations of the brain, right? Or just cavernoma. And I had no idea what it was, what it meant, nothing. And I'm navigating through understanding this condition and my health while I'm preparing for a world title fight, getting hit in the head every single day, and also wondering if the fight's even going to happen because no one is approving me. No doctor is saying.
So when the scan came in, I mean, this is one of those conditions that they will not approve you for?
No. 100% no.
Is it why? Because I mean, I guess because it's a condition, you're more prone to.
So the nature of the condition is my brain has these extra blood vessels that grow and they kind of vine up together, like they wrap together. And so then they look like this little cluster. And in that vine is the potential for these vessels to bleed. And then you're bleeding in your brain, which of course is never good.
Yeah, not a good thing.
Right. And due to that being the nature of the condition and the fact that we're talking about head trauma, me getting hit in the head, every doctor that I was talking to leading up to that fight was just a flat no. Right. As soon as you mentioned what I had, they saw my scans. Most of them did not even look at my scans.
They just heard the condition and that was it.
Yeah. And it got to the point where I didn't even go see them. I was just calling, and it was flat no off the bat. And so it wasn't until 2 weeks before the fight that I actually finally got approved to fight. It took me 2.5 weeks. I was in Brazil at the time because I was doing that phase of my fight camp where I'm in Brazil sparring.
Oh, so did you do? So you did your training camp in Brazil?
I always did a portion of my training camps for my fights in Brazil, in the south of Brazil, a place called Curitiba. That is where my Muay Thai coach, MMA coach, is from. And oddly enough, it's a set of brothers too. And they very much resemble Salo and Shanji in the sense that there's a very scary brother and then a very nice, friendly brother.
Which one is which in Salo and Shanji?
Funny.
Yeah.
And the
is
scary brother,
is,
the scary
is that
brother
near
was
Florianopolis?
Yes.
Yeah. Okay.
A few hour drive away in the south.
Okay.
Yes. The scary brother was in Curitiba, and he has a really amazing fight team there. Mm-hmm. And I would go there to get the sparring, the bodies, and really just kind of Rocky style, right? Mm-hmm. You got to escape, forget about business, forget about everything else, and just remind myself, hey, you are about to fight. And so we must be ready to fight. Mm-hmm. And down there, you're literally fighting every day. So you can't not think about fighting. But that's where I was. And then we see all these doctors, and then finally we end up seeing the most experienced doctor, the actual specialist, the one who's a neurosurgeon. We would try to talk to other neurologists, and it was just always no right off the bat.
Yeah, it's because they want to cover their ass.
Yeah,
if they say yes and something happens, then they're liable.
Right.
So it's easier just to say no.
Right, exactly.
What's interesting when you were talking about it, I played football. They never gave us brain scans.
Which is crazy.
Well, I mean, way more hits in a single day than what you guys saw in MMA. And
harder hits.
Well, yeah, you got big dudes.
Everyone's getting concussed.
Yeah, with like a 8-pound helmet that you use a weapon to fucking ram your head into it. And nobody ever scanned our brains when we were 14. Never when I went to college. I think the first time I had somebody do some brain scan was when we went to the NFL. Uh-huh. So it's pretty amazing that.
Yeah.
I mean,
same thing for MMA too. I mean, not the same, different concussion level happening, but you would kind of think that probably every state should adopt some sort of brain exam for their commission, requirements. Yeah. But long story short, this guy, he's like the professor for some of the other doctors we had already seen. Super well respected. That's why it took so long for us to get to him. His schedule, he was all booked out, blah, 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 blah. He was the first one to just have a conversation with me and say, hey, how do you feel? I was like, man, I had no idea. Like, I feel fine. I'm good. And he was just like, look, there's no evidence, there's no studies or data to support that getting hit in the head is going to make this worse. I hadn't had the genetic test done, but he was one of the first ones to say, look, I bet you were born with this. You've probably had it your whole life. It's never been a problem. It may never be a problem. If it does happen to become a problem, you'll probably already be very old when that happens. And now that we know that you have it, we can stay on top of it and just keep getting regular scans done. And if we see any change, then we'll pull you back.
Yeah.
But until we see change, and until you experience a symptom, I'm going to say that it's okay for you to fight.
Nice.
And he wrote the letter.
Yeah.
And I hadn't submitted my brain scan yet. I didn't tell Bellator what was going on. And then until I got that letter, and then I sent everything to them. It's like, here's the issue. Here's what I got. Here's this letter. Let me know what the commission says. And literally, it was 2 weeks before the fight, and I'm supposed to leave in a week because I'm going to London a week early to adjust. 2 weeks before the fight, finally they said, okay, we're going to let you fight. And then I won the fight, and it was a very hard fight that I was a big underdog for. I was not supposed to win on paper.
Who'd you fight?
I fought Gegard Mousasi, who was considered, especially at that time, he was still in his prime. He's taken a couple other losses since then in the recent years, but he was on a big win streak. He hadn't lost in like 7 years, something like that. He was in the top 5 in the UFC, about to get a title shot, and then moved to the Bellator, and then just had been killing everybody in Bellator, and was their champion, obviously. And I'm a huge underdog. He has 50 fights. I had 9. He had only lost like 4 fights. It was like 46-4. And he's an incredible kickboxer that has shown to have a good ground game. So on paper, he was supposed to be able to nullify any threat of my takedown and ground game and then knock me out. And I had this terrible camp.
Yeah.
Obviously.
I would hope so.
Stressful
to say the least.
Yeah. I'm crying every day.
Yeah.
I don't know if it's even going to happen. You work so hard to get here. This is literally my life mission, a new life mission to become an MMA world champion, all these things. I also felt an extreme responsibility to want that team, those people that are in my corner. I wanted them to be world champions too, and I, like my dad and my coach who invested so much in me, my MMA Muay Thai coach, I wanted to take them to that top. And now I'm like, fuck, we're here and it may not even happen. I might not get to fight ever again. And, it worked out to where I could, but it was not a good camp as far as all that stress and emotion. And in the back of my mind, I'm worried if I'm like really damaging my health, seriously. But I just knew, I told myself, hey, whatever's going to happen, I have to do this fight. I have to know that I went for that world that world title, and whatever happens. And so I really went into that fight like it could be the last fight of my life. I didn't know what was going to happen. And anyways, it came down to the 5th round, and I won the 5th round in dominant fashion. I didn't even get touched in the 5th round, and that's what won me the fight. And we had already signed to do a rematch in California in January of the following year. I start camp, and I'm actually down here in Austin doing part of my camp. I would always come down here, train at the Onnit gym, and they have everything, recovery, strength and conditioning coaches. I had good Muay Thai training here and all this stuff, jiu-jitsu, and a doctor that's on the European Athletic Commission ends up getting in touch with me and calling me. And he says, we created a panel and we've been discussing your condition and the fact that you fought and blah, 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 blah. And, this was such a unique situation that they created a panel to keep talking about it, to understand how their response was and what they should do going forward or whatever. And he says, look, we should not have let you fight, and we will never approve you to fight here again. And I strongly recommend you never fight again. And I get super emotional. And once again, I'm like in a training camp, and so I start telling Bellator, look, I'm not going through another fight camp wondering if I'm going to get to even fight or not. Yeah. California, I have a feeling, they're like, we need to talk to them now. We need to let them know what's going on, give them my scans and all this. So Bellator ends up flying me out to UCLA. I end up seeing some really specialized neurosurgeons, neurologists. I get a great feedback from them. Literally the same thing that the doctor in Brazil says. Turn everything in to the California Athletic Commission so I can get approved now for the fight. And they say no. The Athletic Commission says no. And now I'm at this point where fighting in the U.S. isn't going to happen. Fighting in Europe isn't going to happen. And I'm the Bellator champion. And I'm just sitting there like, okay, what are we going to do? And I had a mutual friend. I had been on the Joe Rogan show a couple years prior when I had just won the #1 contender fight. And Joe just fortunately gave me the opportunity. He's like, hey, I know you're going through some crazy stuff. why don't you just come in here and let it all out and get it off your chest, you know? Because I'd already had people messaging me, asking, when are you going to defend the belt? When are you going to defend the belt? What's going on? Da, da, da. Oh, he's scared. He's scared to fight. And I'd already signed.
Fans are the worst.
Yes. Yeah.
The best.
Not even, well, it's not fans.
No, they're not fans. They're just fucking haters.
Yeah, haters.
They're people that have never accomplished shit in their life. And they somehow
keyboard warriors
make themselves feel better by taking pot shots on people. I mean, dude, we saw it every Sunday.
Yeah.
You know, all these people that have never played a single down, never strapped it up,
Right.
that are these experts that all want to fucking shit on everything. And I'm like, I've always, and the fight game even bothers me even more because I respect anybody that has the stones to walk in there.
Oh
and
my
like,
gosh.
I mean, just the
Of
fact,
course.
and you see guys like,
if you haven't done it,
yeah. Well, they
you have
were
no idea the level of chaos and fear and just what you're doing to your body. And oh my God, the stress.
Well, it was like Masvidal where he did that knee, jumping knee, and he got Ben Askren. Yeah. And like, I mean, they were absolutely decimating him. And I'm like, dude, the guy went in there. He trained. He had a camp.
Yeah.
The guy, what's
how
his name?
many fights
Game
did
breed.
he win? It's like you can win a million fights. You lose one. Oh, he's done.
And then he's to highlight that dude does that flying knee, knowing he's a wrestler, probably had that whole thing in.
Yeah.
And like they shit on that dude. And I'm like, man, like it's a whole bunch of people that have never strapped it up a single day, that have never been choked out, that have never taken these hits.
Right.
And, that's why I'm always like, man, like the guy might have done well, but anybody that goes into that cage or goes into those situations or goes into a fight, like I love watching all the old Mike Tyson stuff because you can see his opponents, like their eyes are real big and they're still in there and they know they're about to get decimated and they still made the walk. I think those people get respect.
Yeah. Yeah, for sure. I feel the same way, especially after experiencing MMA firsthand. Man, if you're in there, you deserve respect.
Yeah.
100%.
So you go on Joe Rogan, you dump it all out.
Yeah.
And
because
nothing-
I had been lying to everybody.
Oh,
I mean, I hadn't even told my family. You know, I was holding on to this. The only people that knew were a couple of my coaches and my wife, who was my girlfriend or fiance at the time. I don't know. I hadn't proposed to her yet. I was just about to propose to her. I didn't want to tell anybody because I didn't want to freak everybody out if I was able to keep fighting.
Sure.
So my idea was, I'll tell my parents later whenever I retire.
Yeah.
I was just going to keep it a secret. And literally everyone around me, hey, what's going on? And I told them, oh yeah, I'm getting ready. They see me training for a new fight that's supposed to happen in January. And then they see me not training and they're like, what's up? And I'm like, I think they want to move it to another place. Da, da, da. I'm just making up stories every single day. I'm lying to people all around me. And then of course, online, everyone's like, oh, when's Lovato defending the belt? He doesn't want to do the rematch. He's scared of Musasi, whatever, da, 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 da. And then finally, after talking with Bellator over and over, like I go there to watch the event that I'm supposed to fight on at the Forum in LA. And we have one more conversation the next day. I have a meeting with Scott, Rich, and everybody. And I'm just like, guys, look, I'm in this bind. We don't have an answer. Like, what am I going to do? I want to control the narrative here. I got this opportunity on Joe. Let me just get it all out, and they supported me. And so I put it all out there on Joe's show. And it was a little hard because then like the next day Bellator was like, yeah, he relinquished the belt. And I was like, yeah, well, that wasn't really what I was trying to do. I even told Joe, he's like, so you're retiring? And I'm like, no, I'm inevitably sidelined.
Yeah.
I don't know what's going to happen. I'm going to see more doctors and hopefully something can work out, but it is what it is. It didn't. I tried for a year and a half seeing more doctors. I went to the Cleveland Clinic in Las Vegas. I compiled all these letters. I got now over a year's worth of scans. I put it all into the California Athletic Commission. COVID hit, of course, so I'm doing Zooms with them. I'm getting all these tests done. Then they asked me to get more tests done. I do the genetic tests. I do all these other tests that they asked for. I literally spend thousands and thousands of my own dollars. Bellator isn't supporting this anymore. Now it's me out there seeing all these doctors, doing all this stuff. I get it all in the commission, and literally a year and a half later now, 2 years since I fought, it's May of 21. I'm about to get married. May of 2021, we do our final thing where they're going to do their final yay or nay. And still a no. And man, the meeting we did right before that, everyone was ready to say yes, except for one guy. And he asked for more stuff, And then the next hearing that we did, I don't know if he persuaded them or what, but it was just like straight up no's. And man, I burst into tears again. I was just like, God, all I wanted was a chance to go get my belt back.
Yeah.
And it just wasn't going to happen. And then, it was a tough time. I'm coming back to jiu-jitsu, and after years away, focus on MMA and all this stuff, and I'm trying to refine myself. And I had some tough losses, some big wins too, but some tough losses. You could see that I lost a step a little bit. I hadn't been focused on jiu-jitsu. And I'm kind of figuring things out. The pandemic, life, everything was hitting all at once. But I got back to a good place mentally. And 2022, I put together some good wins. At the end of 21 into 22, I won the Europeans again, which is a major jiu-jitsu title. And I did that. I was one of the oldest guys to ever win a major jiu-jitsu title. In the adult division.
You did the adult.
Right.
Nice.
And I had a really great performance, and I had a good showing at the Worlds, a good showing at ADCC, everything. I got married, I had babies. Life was going well. And then it's funny because I told my wife during 2022, she's pregnant. All these great things are happening. I'm getting a string of good wins together. I'm doing my last Worlds, me and Shanji together. We leave our belts on the mat. We have this beautiful, beautiful moment there. And I retire. Basically, I did my last Worlds. And then ADCC's coming up. Literally the biggest grappling event ever. It's ginormous last year. Just blew away any other ADCCs in the past. This is my 7th ADCC. Once again, one of the oldest guys out there. I reached the final 4. I have a good showing. So I'm top 4 in the world at 39. And during these camps, I'm telling my wife, look, I'm doing the biggest gi tournament ever one more time. It's amazing. I'm so grateful. I'm so inspired. I'm doing ADCC, and I got this big, huge standing ovation. It's just amazing, the energy. I never imagined a grappling event or a jiu-jitsu event that big ever. I could going back to being the kid.
Look at 2024. I mean, they rented out that place. It's like 18,000 seats. I mean, it's going to be incredible.
Even bigger, right. But at that time, it was just unbelievable. So I have all these special emotions and feelings. And I tell my wife, hey, how crazy would it be if I get to do an MMA fight this year and I'm able to come back and I did the highest level of gi, the highest level of no gi, and then get to do an MMA fight all in the same year at 39 going on 40. How crazy would that be? And I had always dreamed of fighting in Japan. Mm-hmm. That's every martial artist's dream. Japan was my last hope because Japan, there's no commission. Yeah. They do whatever they want. They don't, whatever. We figure it out, right? But the pandemic hit really hard over there.
Sure.
And so the borders didn't even open until October 2022. And I kept telling her, hey, I'm like, I got my eyes out. I'm like looking and I'm like, man, what if it happens? What if it happens? What if something happens? And sure enough, in November, I get an opportunity. And it happens. And I basically only have 6 weeks to get ready, which is kind of short for an MMA fight. But because I kept competing at the highest level, I just did ADCC. I'm in great shape. My wrestling's good. And I'd still been training Muay Thai and MMA too, because I have fighters and I've been helping them. I never got too far away from competition and MMA training. Because of that, because I didn't just stop. When everything went down with Bellator, I could have easily just retired completely. Mm-hmm. I had the perfect story right there. Like I became world champion, triple combat world champion, gi, no gi, MMA. It would have been a great story to just stop, but I couldn't stop because they told me to stop. It wasn't me stopping. And so I kept going. And then what did I do? I said, oh, let's go back to the gi. Literally the hardest thing I could do, and I went back, just took some L's, but kept pushing. And I went out on my shield in a good way. And because I didn't fully retire, if I hadn't done anything for 3 years and Japan calls, I wouldn't be ready for 6 weeks. Are you kidding me? I wouldn't be ready. But because I kept going, when that opportunity came, I got to scratch off that life dream, go to Japan, fight in Tokyo on New Year's Eve, and I got to do it with my babies with me.
Nice.
We took the babies to Japan. I have twin babies. They were born in July. This was New Year's Eve. And after I won the fight, I fought a 25-year-old 8-0 undefeated fighter, and I kimura'd him in 2 minutes. It was perfect. I didn't even get touched. And I did a kimura, and that's one of my moves. And the kimura, for whatever reason, was eluding me in MMA. I never hit a kimura in MMA, but I had hundreds and hundreds of jiu-jitsu kimuras in competition. And then there I am in Japan, the home of the kimura.
Yeah.
And I hit my first kimura, and it was just beautiful. And then I brought my babies into the ring with me, and I could see that's why everything happened, was so that moment could manifest itself.
Man, it's amazing. It's incredible that you got the cap. A lot of people don't get the opportunity to, and not to say you've gone out. I was laughing when we were at Worlds. You were like, I think you even said to me, I'm sad I left my belt out there. I kind of wanted to get back in there. And you see those guys, and if you can go out there and be competitive, why wouldn't you be competitive?
Well, that's the thing people don't understand. You hear a lot of people talk, oh, why doesn't he hang it up? He's got to know when to hang it up. The thing is, in order to become great, you have this resilient belief in yourself that you can do it, that you're capable. I can, I know I can win. I know I can win. And it's hard to accept or come to terms with, I can't anymore, And so if physically you still feel good and you're able to train and you're still motivated, I can see why a lot of people could not just start saying, oh yeah, no, I can't and I won't or whatever. I'm definitely the type that's like that. And I love competition and I keep myself in shape. And that's why I'm still going a little bit, and
well, if you got these young fighters and you have the competition and you're competitive with the best in the world, makes total sense.
Yeah. Yeah. So we'll see what happens at ADCC next year. I might just have to tell everyone, hey guys, I was just kidding last time. I'm back. One more.
I like it.
We'll see.
I'll be stoked to see. I'm definitely going to be there. I'm excited to see these guys go out and do it. And it's amazing to see what's happened. I remember watching the very first UFC fight. And I remember it was, no weight classes, Horace Gracie's out there in his gi, the dude's out there and that guy gets kicked in the face, who was the guy that got kicked in the face?
The sumo guy.
Yeah. And his teeth got knocked out. And I remember being like, oh my God. So to see the evolution of it, and then to see the wrestling and all this, it's been incredible. And then to see the jiu-jitsu stuff. So it's neat for me because I'm kind of a snob in a lot of ways by playing in the NFL, which I consider to be, the top of the sports, right? Yeah. I mean, millions of people around the world, hundreds of thousands of people, and
the best athletes.
Yeah. And you get to go and you pretty much tee it up against the toughest guys in the world every Sunday in front of millions of people in fancy uniforms. And I got to do that for a decade. So in a way, that's my perception of what it looks like. And it's so neat to see young athletes in a sport that's ascending, because I think jiu-jitsu is exciting. And what I'm excited about is how often they get to compete. We only got to do it 17, 18 times, whatever it is, playoffs, however it looked. And I got to do it once a week in front of people. But the fact that these guys have all these tournaments, I wish there was a little bit better organization to treat the athletes better. Mm-hmm. When I went to the Worlds, I was fucking like my head almost exploded to see that these kids are laying on the back on jiu-jitsu mats underneath the stands. Mm-hmm. They didn't have water or lunches or any of that other stuff. I was like, man, we're not doing it like this ever again.
Yeah.
If I had known, we would have prepped different.
Well,
but
you'll see that at ADCC next year. ADCC is the elite professional event. I mean, they are paying at the Worlds now. Actually, it's funny. Shanji just reminded me that. He's like, "Oh yeah, Victor won this much money." I was like, "Oh what?"
Oh, and he got a cool ring.
Yeah.
And he got a diamond ring, which I was stoked for him.
Yeah, and I'm like, "Damn, man!" And I made a joke with Shanji. I was like, "Hey, they owe you a lot of money."
Well, it was funny when I was sitting there with Shanji. He was like, they were showing up on the big Jumbotron marquee deal, like all like the Hall of Famers and like the years and all that. And he's like, "Hey, look, there I am." And then it was like the next year, he's like, "Hey, look at that one." And he was just like, kept like, "Oh, there's my brother. There's this." So it was neat to see the history. And what's wild is to see like this whole thing kind of going on, and like it's like the growth and just really watching it. It's been an amazing thing to kind of drop in and see, and to watch the growth. And I like, for me, I mean, I take all my kids. Mm-hmm. I want them to have this school or this skill. I want them to be exposed to it.
It's the best education.
It is
the best education.
Well, you saw my son yesterday.
Yeah,
in the weight room, like working out, like he was right there with us, right in the middle,
leading by example. You're showing him your work, what you do. He's seen the other athletes. He's going to be inspired. He wants to be strong already. Now I'm a brand new father. Kids just turned 1.
Well, I got twin girls too. My little girls are 11.
I need to meet them too.
Yeah. Oh yeah. They'll. We're probably going to miss it right now, but there's a teenage class that I take Jamie, my daughter, to at Victor's place. But it's incredible. It was funny. She came in yesterday and she was trying to be all super cool with everybody, like, "What's up, bro?" and this. And Arash totally checked Jamie. And then like she came on the mat and was like putting her gi on, and Victor's like, "Step off the mat. Don't come on the mat unless you're dressed." Mm-hmm. I was ecstatic that there's a standard, hold it in the car. She's like, "Why are they acting like that?" I'm like, "Because there's a standard. Like, you can be friendly, but they're not your friends. Those are your instructors. They're your coaches. They're my friends, and they're guys I train. They're my athletes." And I tell them this constantly: we can be friendly, but when it's time to work, it's time to work. Mm-hmm. And like, you have to learn that. And when you learn that, they will respect you. Then you can joke around. Yeah. So 100%. It was great that like,
and it's great you have other people doing that.
Oh my God.
Because if you do it,
they only hear so much from their father.
Right.
When all of a sudden they hear this, and then it was a Rush hitter, and then a Victor. I was like, I told them today I was so stoked for them. So what does the future hold for Lovato?
Man, it's competitively. I'm kind of on just going with the flow, I guess you would say. I'm always the type that has a plan, But I kind of did my big goodbyes. I feel very content for the first time in my life, actually, that as soon as that fight in Japan was over, I just felt like this incredible weight.
Like you accomplished what you needed to accomplish.
Yes. I didn't give up. I made my comeback. I didn't have someone else ending my career for me. And, I did my big goodbye at the Worlds and ADCC and everything else. And I kind of just had this super content feeling. And I did take a good break earlier this year and just soaked up family time. And, of course, I have a lot of business aspirations, with my school, my affiliate network, my association. We're over 30 schools now across North America.
Is it Lovato Jiu-Jitsu?
Lovato Jiu-Jitsu Association, yes. Which is, brother or sister franchise to Six Blades. Mm-hmm. We all...
There's some weird ancestral, ancestral, not ancestral. There's a weird...
We all fly the same flag, more or less, but it's nice because then we reach more. I have a team that I've been building worldwide for a long time, and he has his team, and then we all come together and fight as one.
Yeah.
But
like the Jedi Knights.
Yeah, exactly. But so I'm going to keep building that, keep doing what I do, show up, train, and teach every day. Trying to promote the timeless and build that out and motivate, inspire people with that inside of jiu-jitsu. I have a book that is nearly complete. That will be coming out early next year. And I have actually for that Japan fight, the comeback fight, Will Harris, who is a very well-known documentarian, he did the Anatomy of a Fighter series following several UFC fighters, and he has many videos on YouTube that have millions and millions of views. He actually documented this Japan comeback fight that I did. He went to Japan with us and everything. And that is nearly complete. And I mean, it's basically complete, but we've got a few finishing touches on that. And that's going to have the same title as my book.
Nice.
So I have these two things, and maybe down the line that leads to some podcasting and stuff. But, a lot of things to keep me busy. But then number one, I'm just really enjoying being a father, family life, learning and thinking about the future in that, and teaching and helping my kids to grow to go, be great in whatever they want to do. We'll have to have another podcast or conversation about some
parenting?
of those thoughts. Yes.
There's a lot of them.
I would love to discuss and get your knowledge and ideas there. I'm sure it's impossible to really have any expectations.
No,
right?
I think raising sons is different than daughters. And you'll see. I mean, you got one of each.
I already feel a difference.
Yeah,
even though they're one, the way I feel my boy, I just want to grab him and throw him around and just like, hey, let's go, come on, da, da, da. And then her, I'm just like, oh.
I think you have to treat your daughter or like your son. I had a dad tell me once, he's like, this whole deal about your little girl's got him wrapped around the finger. He's like, if you can get away from that and just treat her like the boys, you'll do them a greater disservice. If you put her up on a pedestal, he's like, I don't think that does your daughter a service. And I'm like, oh, okay. So I've always been, because it's really easy to do. Yeah.
But yeah, she could do it to me already.
Yeah. So then, and
she's just a little baby, and I'm like, oh.
Yeah. And they're super cute, but I've tried to make like a conscious effort to treat them very equal. Mm-hmm. And, cause the age old of like, oh, I'm going to raise my son to be a man, but I'm going to raise my daughter to be a princess. And I'm like, I don't know what that expectation is. And that's what the guy said. He's like, you raise your daughter to be a princess. Like you want her to have a very positive perception of what a man is. And the way that women learn that is how you treat their mothers. Mm-hmm. Yeah. If you have a good relationship with the mom and you treat their mother well, and especially with respect. Yeah. I remember my dad was a criminal defense attorney for over 55 years. And I asked him, I was like, hey, did you ever do any family law? He's like, yeah, a few times. He's like, I couldn't do it. It was too ugly doing divorces. I was like, Dad, you've represented gangbangers and killers and murderers and this. And he's like, it's a lot cleaner and easier than doing family law and divorces. And I was like, why is that? And we got into a conversation about it. And I asked him, was there one common thread that you saw with a divorce? What would happen? And he goes, yeah, when people lose respect for each other. Mm-hmm. And he goes, I got to see it at the worst, where all of a sudden they didn't respect each other and the ugly things they say. He's like, as long as you have respect for your partner, the marriage can continue. The minute you lose respect, it's over. Yeah. And so I think for that, as long as you respect the other individual and you treat their mother well, I think daughters learn how a man should treat them based on how you treat their mother. Right. But a son is a little bit different. Yeah. He's going to learn how to be a man based on who you are as a father, the example, and especially the people that you bring into your life. That's why I'm very conscious of who the other men are in his life. Right. And the standard in this, and especially, and that's what I really enjoyed about taking the kids to jiu-jitsu and training with, Victor and Shanji, is there's a expectation. They demand a lot from those kids, but they're also really good with them. I mean, the fact that Victor teaches little kid classes, I mean, he's got to be the only world champion out there that actually still trains kids. Yeah. And you should see how excited those kids are that Victor's there. Yesterday, he showed up a little late and they was like, Mr. Victor's here. That was my fault. Oh yeah. But it was hilarious. They cheered. And they know he's a world champion. And when I came home after we were at Worlds and showing the girls and Kashi, all of the videos and what he's doing and how well he done in the medals, they were, felt like they had a part of it. Yeah. And I think, I know that that's important to them, and they'll remember, kind of like you're sitting here talking about, my dad trained with this guy and this. I mean, these are the stories that build us. Right. And that's why I'm always so fascinated by the origin story. Everybody always wants to know what you've accomplished, and they want to know what you've done. I'm always fascinated on the origin, because 100%. Nobody ever accomplished something great where the origin story isn't interesting to me. Right. Right. And so many things come in line. Yeah. And it's so neat to hear. I mean, you grew up in this place and you're exposed to this, the fact that your dad jumped in the car and drove 3 hours, that tells volumes about your dad.
20 plus hours he would drive from Oklahoma to California.
Yeah, it's crazy. But like it was wild. Like the first day when I met Shanji, I took Jamie up. We met through Scotty Oates, and I wanted to. My daughter Jamie didn't want to swim anymore, so I took her up to do jits. And as I brought her up, and she was going through, with Shanji, he's like, "Oh, it's kind of a far drive." And I was like, "Yeah, it's like, I mean, it could be an hour, it could be 30 minutes, but if the best dude in the world lives up the street from you, and I got to drive an extra 20 minutes, it doesn't make a big a difference."
Yeah.
And he was like, kind of looked at me. I guess a lot of people have been like, "Oh, the drive's too far."
Mm-hmm.
And I was like, "Well, this dude's like won like a ton of world championships, and is like, one of the, I looked it up, and it was like, the best ever do it for 15 years on some website deal."
Yeah.
And I was like, "No, dude, we're good. I don't mind doing the drive."
Yeah. That's awesome.
And, and then we obviously met Victor, and his school's a little closer. So I take my son over there just because Arash is so good.
Yeah.
But it's really neat to see the community. But no, man, I'm stoked that you got to share this this origin story with me. I'm fascinated by these stories.
My wife, it's a good time to just give her some love and shout out. She is incredible. And watching her become a mom, and she really is super mom. We have twins, and it's not like my life is normal. I'm all over the place doing all these. I mean, I did worlds, ADCC, fought MMA in Japan. Who got the babies to Japan? I was already in Japan. She got there with her mom.
I almost had a panic attack thinking about taking 6 months old babies, because we did that. We took our my son was 9 months old, and we took him to a wedding in the UK. He probably has never slept well. So the fact that you guys took the kids and had them there, it's amazing.
Yeah. Well, that's my wife. And she's just incredible, amazing woman that gets all my love and respect, 100%. And at the end of the day, of course, I will do my best to be, the best dad I can. But knowing that she's going to be the best mom she can as well, the babies are, they're going to be, yeah. They're gonna have no choice, but to rise to the occasion with her, me, and all the great people we have around. So, but the future, I'm still in the game a little bit. Like I had this amazing opportunity to compete for Who's Number One. They came to Oklahoma City, so
that was excellent.
I wouldn't be surprised if something else comes up with that, and just as I keep Victor sharp and train with these kids. We'll see what happens for ADCC next year. But I got to end things with going back to this story that I said I had with Saulo. Because I talked about him so much. It's not long. It's a quick story. I went to Brazil to do the Brazilian Nationals this year in the master division. I'm done with adult gi. I'm not going to do any more adult gi. But it had been 10 years since I competed in Brazil. And I really felt like my heart was telling me, you should go. Go do that. Do it as a master, and get that little fire, get that little inspiration. Because I only want to do what inspires me. And anytime I compete in Brazil, I'm extremely inspired. I think about being the teenager 20 plus years ago down there, and just it does something special to me. So I decided I'm going to go, and Saulo's there. Funny, he never told me he was going to be there. I knew he was in Brazil, but he's in a different city. And then IBJJF posts a picture of him, Saulo Ribeiro, in the house at the Brazilian Nationals. And I messaged Saulo. I'm like, "Oh yes, you're gonna be." And of course he says, "What'd you expect? Of course I'm gonna be here. You're coming."
Yeah.
It's typical Saulo answer. So now I'm even more inspired. I'm gonna get to compete in Brazil, which I hadn't done in 10 years, and I hadn't done that with Saulo since 2005. Something like that. Almost 20 years that I had Saulo with me in Brazil, and we're doing a tournament, and he's in my corner, right? He's there to coach me and support me. So he is there for every single one of my matches. And I had like a 50-man division. I had 5 fights to win. So it's an all-day thing. And I'm having one of my best performances, just as far as like the clean, the precision, the jiu-jitsu that I'm demonstrating. It is so much Saulo style, so much of his influence. You can see what I'm doing. I'm mounting and choking everybody. And remember, I didn't do that until I learned it from him. Mm-hmm. I am doing to these guys what he did to me for many years, right? And so I'm showing his jiu-jitsu, and we're just, the energy is going, it's amazing. I'm in the final. The guy ends up taking me down, so he's up 2 points. So it's a little scrappy, and everyone goes crazy when he takes me down, you know. Obviously, he's Brazilian. And I come back, I sweep him back, and I land right in the half guard. Boom, I land in a beautiful, beautiful spot. It's 2-2, and now it's time for me to win. I get to a position where basically if it was chess, I know it's over. It's over. And it is a spot that is so Saulo style, his influence on me, what he taught me, and how I made it my own. It is Saulo style. And he is there, and we're in Brazil. And just this whole energy, 20 years we've been training together now. It's our 20-year anniversaries this year from our fight. It was 20 years ago. It was 2003, 2023. I get to the spot. I know it's over. But it's not, I haven't scored any more points. It's still 2-2. I know it's the beginning of the end for this guy. And I look up at Saulo, and I just give him like this little nod. And I see him give me this proud, and Saulo's not the type to smile. Not a proud smile. If we're joking, we, whatever. I mean, he'll laugh, he'll smile, but that endearing, lovely, like proud, my son, smile. He gives me this beautiful little, just this little nod, smile, look, and I got a picture of it. A photographer sent me a picture in that spot. You can see, he takes a picture of me, and then you can zoom in and see Saulo's face in the back. Like you just, use your finger, zoom in. And as far as things that have happened to me, like that just, like I told you how much love I have for Saulo and all that, just that moment right there, man, that was special. That was really special. And then I sure enough, a few steps later, I end up choking, finishing the guy. And it was like his move. I haven't told that story like this, so I thought it'd be a good way for us to end. But that was that mentor, that guy that saw that kid who fought him, and 20 years later, I think I finally made him proud in that moment. I mean, of course, he's been proud of me, but that was something really, really beautiful. And then 2 weeks later, I won that Who's Number One in my town. And now I'm just, like I said, just riding the wave. And we'll see what happens next competitively. But I thought I had to share that with you.
It's amazing.
And I'm looking forward to when you get to spend a little time with him.
Sounds great. Well, I'm going to end it there because anything else I say is disingenuous. So thanks for tuning in to another episode of Power Athlete Radio.